In this video, we're breaking down 3 hours of the best SpongeBob episodes. Let's get started. First up, we got Band Geeks Season 2, Episode 15B. When fans talk about the greatest SpongeBob SquarePants episodes ever made, one title comes up more than any other. Band Geeks aired on the 7th of September, 2001 during the show's second season, and it became the episode that defined what SpongeBob could achieve. The episode centers on Squidward attempting to organize and conduct a marching band in just 1 week to perform at the Bubble Bowl, all because of a rivalry with his old band class nemesis. What starts as a simple premise about Squidward's insecurity transforms into something far more meaningful by the final scene. The episode opens at Squidward's house where he's playing his clarinet. 2 neighbors show up at his door, claiming they're from the pet hospital down the street, saying they heard there was a dying animal on the premises. Squidward slams the door in their faces. The phone rings and Squidward answers with his usual pretentious greeting, telling callers they've reached the house of unrecognized talent. The voice on the other end belongs to Squilliam Fancison from band class. Squilliam wastes no time mocking Squidward, mentioning he heard Squidward is now playing the cash register. Squidward admits he works at the register sometimes and tries to deflect by asking about Squilliam's unibrow. Squilliam waves his unibrow and brags that it's big and valuable. He reveals he's now the leader of a big fancy band that's supposed to play the Bubble Bowl next week. Squidward can barely get the words out, stuttering about the Bubble Bowl. Squilliam confirms he's living Squidward's dreams, but says he's busy next week and can't make it, so he was hoping Squidward and his band could cover for them. Squidward stammers, unable to respond. Squilliam immediately sees through him and says he knew Squidward doesn't even have a band. He tells Squidward he'll let him get back to the service industry now. This pushes Squidward over the edge. He shouts that it just so happens he doesn't sell fast food, he does have a band, and they're going to play that Bubble Bowl. Squilliam wishes him good luck for next Tuesday and says he hopes the audience brings lots of ibuprofen. After they hang up, Squidward realizes he needs to drum up a marching band fast. Squidward creates posters advertising the opportunity to join a marching band. The posters promise fulfillment for dull lives, the chance to become part of the greatest musical sensation to hit Bikini Bottom, being forever adored by thousands of people they don't know, free refreshments, and practice starting at 8:30 that night. Various Bikini Bottom residents see these posters in different locations. Sandy reads one on a pole, Plankton sees one in a bakery window, Mrs. Puff spots one, Mr. Krabs notices the free refreshments promise, and Larry reads one while in his shower. Squidward drives a shell cart filled with boxes of musical instruments, sheet music, and marching uniforms crammed in the back seat. His watch shows 8:35. He complains about the stupid music rental clerk making him late, saying the trilobite didn't know an oboe from an elbow. When Squidward enters the practice room, everyone is already there holding instruments and talking amongst themselves. He walks to the front and tells people to settle down. He asks how many have played musical instruments before. Plankton holds up a triangle and raises his hand, asking if instruments of torture count. Squidward says no. Patrick raises his hand while holding a trumpet and asks if mayonnaise is an instrument. Squidward tells him no, mayonnaise is not an instrument. Patrick raises his hand again, and Squidward adds that horseradish is not an instrument either. Patrick lowers his hand. Squidward acknowledges that no one has any experience, but says fortunately he has enough talent for all of them. He slaps his leg and laughs, but everyone stays silent. Mr. Krabs asks when they get the free food. Squidward tells them to try repeating after him and plays 6 notes on his clarinet. The brass section repeats badly. The wind section repeats badly. When the drummers try, they misunderstand and blow on their sticks, which shoot out of their mouths and stick Squidward to the wall. He mutters that it's too bad that didn't kill him. The practice continues with Squidward trying to get everyone to step in rhythm. He wants everyone to stand in straight rows of 5. SpongeBob raises his hand and asks if this is the part where they start kicking. Squidward explains that's a chorus line, not what they're doing. Patrick hears the word kicking and says he wants to do some kicking. He immediately kicks Sandy in the leg. Sandy gets angry and jumps on Patrick, beating him up as they roll outside and the doors slam shut. Patrick screams and sobs in pain. Everyone pauses and stares at the door. Patrick sticks his head back in and announces that whoever owns the white sedan left their lights on. When Patrick walks back in, it's revealed that Sandy has stuck his entire body through a trombone with his head coming out the other end. The trombone makes musical notes with each step. When he sits down, opening his mouth creates a loud trombone noise. Patrick looks down at himself, confused. On day 2, the band marches down a street playing Semper Fidelis terribly. Squidward sarcastically calls it perfect and says the Bubble Bowl is within reach. He tells the flag twirlers to really spin those things and calls for a turn. He keeps yelling at the flag twirlers to move and spin. They spin so hard that they take off into the sky and crash directly into a blimp. The blimp explodes, killing all 3 flag twirlers. One band member plays taps while everyone mourns. Squidward just lies down on the ground and curls into a fetal position, completely broken. Day 3 arrives, and Squidward asks Plankton how the harmonica solo is coming. Plankton claims it's tremendous and asks if Squidward wants to see. Plankton plays by running back and forth between the harmonica holes quickly. He soon runs completely out of breath. On his way to the last hole, he pants as he walks toward it and blows an unsuccessful last raspberry into the harmonica before fainting from exhaustion. Day 4 comes, and Squidward acknowledges this is their last night together before the show. He admits they haven't improved since they began. fan. Patrick is actively chewing on a trumpet during this speech. Squidward says he has a theory. He asks if people talk loud when they want to act smart. Plankton loudly shouts that he's correct. Squidward explains that if they play loud, people might think they're good. He counts them in with 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3, 4. The screen cuts to outside the music school, and a massive blast of noise comes from inside, breaking all the windows. Inside, Squidward's face is deformed beyond recognition, his shirt has been ripped, and his baton breaks in half. He suggests a new theory about playing so quietly that no one can hear them. Tension erupts when Harold complains that maybe they wouldn't sound so bad if some people didn't try to play with big meaty claws. Mr. Krabs demands to know what Harold said. Harold shouts the words big, meaty, claws even louder. Mr. Krabs responds that these claws aren't just for attracting mates. Harold tells him to bring it on. SpongeBob tries intervening, suggesting people be smart and bring it off instead. Another band member dismisses SpongeBob, asking why the talking cheese is going to preach to them now. Squidward tries to explain that tensions are high, but every band member gets into a massive fight. People are yelling at each other. Someone slams a drum on another member. Squidward tries settling the chaos in a semi-worried tone, reminding everyone there's a deposit on that equipment. Every band member starts using their instruments as weapons. Mr. Krabs and another member charge at each other with large woodwinds, trying to screech to a halt, but Mrs. Puff slams them both with her cymbals. Squidward begs them to settle down. Sandy and another member fight until Sandy breaks the xylophone keys and the other person runs away. Patrick kicks Sandy, who growls at him before producing a trumpet with an evil grin. Patrick realizes what's about to happen and runs away screaming as Sandy chases him with the trumpet. The clock shows it's 10 o'clock and everyone immediately stops fighting. Someone notes that class is over. Band members casually chat as they head to the door about seeing each other tomorrow. Squidward slams the door open and delivers a devastating speech. He tells them they took his one chance at happiness and crushed it into little tiny bite-sized pieces. He says he really expected better of them and guesses he's a loser for that too. He tells them not to bother showing up tomorrow because he'll just tell everyone they all died in a marching accident. He thanks them, crying, for nothing, and leaves. Patrick responds by saying they're welcome. SpongeBob immediately asks what kind of monsters they are. He points out that the poor creature came to them in his hour of need and they failed him. He reminds them that Squidward has always been there for them when it was convenient for him. He asks Evelyn who rescued her little Jimmy when he was trapped in a fire. Evelyn answers that a fireman did. SpongeBob asks Larry who revived him when his heart gave out from all those tanning pills. Larry answers that some guy in an ambulance did. SpongeBob says that's right. So if they can all just pretend Squidward was a fireman or some guy in an ambulance, then they can pull together and discover what it truly means to be in a marching band. Harold agrees to do it for the firemen. Everyone cheers. SpongeBob tells them to make Squidward proud and counts them in. At the Bubble Bowl, Squidward arrives knowing this was going to happen. He assumes they'll just have to find another band to play and hopes Squilliam doesn't find out. The camera zooms out to reveal Squilliam is standing right there. Squidward screams and demands to know what Squilliam is doing there. Squilliam laughs and says he just wants to watch Squidward blow it. He asks where Squidward's band is. Squidward stammers that they couldn't come because they died. Squilliam points and asks who that is. Squidward's eyes literally pop out of his head as he screams. He admits that would be his band. SpongeBob announces they're ready to perform. Squilliam comments that this is exactly how he pictured Squidward's band would look. SpongeBob dances eagerly. Squidward explains that's his eager face. Squilliam laughs as Squidward and the band head into the Bubble Bowl. As everybody marches in, Squidward mutters that he guesses this will be the last time he can show his face in this town. SpongeBob, still enthusiastic, tells him that's the spirit. The bowl raises above a football field. An announcer tells the football fans to put their hands together for the Bikini Bottom Super Band. A crowd of actual live-action people waving towels and cheering is shown. Patrick comments that these are some ugly-looking fish. SpongeBob wonders if they're in one of those toxic waste dumps. Mr. Krabs says he thinks he's going to be sick. Squidward nervously addresses everyone and glances at Squilliam, who grins, chuckles, and bounces his unibrow mockingly. Squidward tells everyone to get this over with and counts to 4. The band's horn players play an intro fanfare. Squidward opens his eyes in complete shock at what he's hearing. Plankton plays opening notes on a keyboard. SpongeBob begins singing while the band performs. Patrick wears sunglasses and plays electric drums. Sandy plays electric guitar. Mrs. Puff plays electric bass. Mr. Krabs plays a keytar. Pearl plays saxophone. The band performs the rock song Sweet Victory flawlessly, with professional-level musicianship. Squilliam stares in absolute shock at what he's witnessing. Squidward gives him a smug grin, throws his baton over his shoulder, and uses his arms for conducting. During the performance, Squilliam has a heart attack and faints. He gets carried away on stretchers. Squidward waves a smug goodbye to him and runs to the middle of the stage to conduct. The performance reaches its climax with Squidward jumping into the air. The scene freezes on this triumphant moment before fading to black. Band Geeks earned its reputation as the best SpongeBob episode because it delivered on every level a cartoon can deliver. The episode took Squidward, typically the show's punching bag, and gave him a genuine arc with real stakes. His rivalry with Squilliam represented every person who ever felt like a failure compared to someone from their past. The week of disastrous band practices showed the reality of trying to create something with completely inexperienced people. Every failed attempt, from the flag twirlers dying to Plankton's exhausted harmonica solo to the equipment-destroying fight, built toward what seemed like certain humiliation. The episode earned its emotional weight because it spent time showing just how impossible Squidward's situation was. When SpongeBob rallied the band after Squidward's breakdown, it mattered because the episode had established these characters as genuinely terrible musicians who cared more about free food than helping Squidward. The Bubble Bowl performance worked as a payoff because the episode spent 20 minutes showing why it shouldn't work. The reveal that the band could actually play happened in real time as Squidward discovered it himself, making the audience feel his shock and joy simultaneously. The frozen frame of Squidward jumping in triumph became one of the most iconic images in SpongeBob history because the episode earned that moment of pure victory. Band Geeks succeeded by taking a simple premise about a marching band and turning it into a story about redemption, friendship, and the triumph of the underdog that resonated with viewers of all ages. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Pizza Delivery, Season 1, Episode 5A. Pizza Delivery aired on August 14, 1999 as the first half of the 5th episode of SpongeBob SquarePants Season 1. The episode earned 2.47 million viewers and became one of the most beloved episodes in the entire series. When fans discuss the greatest SpongeBob episodes, Pizza Delivery consistently appears in the conversation alongside Band Geeks. The episode takes a simple premise about delivering a pizza and transforms it into an emotional journey about dedication, friendship, and doing the right thing even when nobody appreciates it. The episode opens at nighttime at the Krusty Krab with SpongeBob cleaning a table. Squidward tells him to hurry up with those chairs because it's after closing and he wants to go home. The phone rings. SpongeBob shouts that he has it and comes running. He leaps for the phone, but Squidward answers it first. SpongeBob falls to the floor. Squidward answers and tells the caller they're closed. Mr. Krabs snatches the phone away from Squidward. He answers with his usual greeting and asks how he can help. The customer explains an order over the phone. Mr. Krabs hears the word pizza, and his eyes turn into dollar signs. He confirms they have pizza. Squidward tries to interrupt, reminding Mr. Krabs of something. Mr. Krabs tells the customer that their delivery squid will bring it right over and hangs up. The customer's voice continues for a moment but gets cut off. Squidward points out that they don't serve pizzas. Mr. Krabs gets a plate of Krabby Patties and smashes them together into a pizza shape. He puts it in a pizza box. Squidward adds that they don't deliver. Mr. Krabs agrees they don't deliver, but Squidward does, and hands him the pizza. Squidward asks if Mr. Krabs can just get SpongeBob to do it. Mr. Krabs calls this a great idea and tells Squidward to take SpongeBob with him. SpongeBob sneaks over with a big smile on his face. Squidward protests that this wasn't what he had in mind. The scene cuts to SpongeBob and Squidward standing near the boat outside the Krusty Krab. SpongeBob starts conducting a vehicle inspection. He checks the front end. He touches the boat antenna, making it vibrate, and checks that off. He checks the bumper. The bumper sticker says, "I brake for sea urchins," and he checks that. He uncaps the tire pressure valve and puts his mouth on it. This causes him to inflate like a balloon. He talks in a squeaky, high-pitched voice while he's now the size of a giant parade balloon and announces he's checking tire pressure. Squidward looks scared. SpongeBob blows out the rest of the pressure directly in Squidward's face, returning SpongeBob to his normal size and voice. He checks off tire pressure. SpongeBob announces that vehicle inspection is complete. He tells Squidward they're really making history here because that lucky customer is going to get the first Krabby Patty pizza ever. Squidward says good, then tells SpongeBob to drive. He tosses his hat away. SpongeBob says he can't because he's still in boating school. Squidward points out it's just around the corner. SpongeBob acknowledges this but hesitates. Squidward tells him to just do what he does in school. SpongeBob agrees, but asks Squidward to wait and not tell him. Squidward tells him to back it up. SpongeBob asks what he said. Squidward repeats to back it up. SpongeBob repeats the words, back it up, and tries to move the stick shift down. Squidward shouts to back it up. SpongeBob says, okay. Squidward yells at him to shift into reverse. SpongeBob repeats the word reverse and questions it. He imagines the words forward and reverse turning into Korean writing. Squidward shouts at him to back it up. SpongeBob shifts gears and announces he's backing up. The boat backs up really fast. Squidward tries to grab the wheel and yells at SpongeBob to give him the wheel. SpongeBob keeps repeating that he's backing up while stretching out the words. They go over a bumpy area with rocks and spin around repeatedly while screaming. The scene fades into the next morning as the boat goes over 5 hills. SpongeBob continues saying he's backing up. The boat stops with no fuel left. SpongeBob says backing up one more time. Squidward acknowledges that SpongeBob backed up. He points out that they're out of gas. His voice echoes as he adds that they're in the middle of nowhere. SpongeBob says he thinks the pizza is getting cold. Squidward sarcastically acts startled about the cold pizza. He asks how this could get any worse and kicks the boat in frustration. The boat's gasoline becomes full again and it drives away into the distance without them. SpongeBob suggests they can still deliver it on foot. Squidward narrows his eyes at him. Later, both walk on the sand. Squidward keeps saying ow repeatedly. SpongeBob sings a song about the Krusty Krab pizza being the pizza for you and me. Squidward complains that his feet are killing him. He trips over SpongeBob, who is lying on the ground. Squidward asks what SpongeBob is doing. SpongeBob rubs the ground and explains it's an old pioneer trick he saw in a movie once. Squidward starts to say this is no time for something, but SpongeBob shushes him and claims it's working. Squidward asks what it is. SpongeBob points to the road and identifies a truck with 16 wheels. He says now he can show Squidward how the pioneers hitchhike. SpongeBob starts dancing in the road while wearing a hat. Squidward sits on a rock playing with a wooden spoon. A swordfish truck driver complains about breakdancers and honks his horn. Squidward gets excited saying the truck is stopping. He realizes the truck is not stopping and grabs SpongeBob out of the way. They get covered in sand thanks to the truck. Squidward narrows his eyes at the smiling SpongeBob. The scene cuts to SpongeBob and Squidward resuming their walk despite heavy winds. SpongeBob continues singing his Krusty Krab pizza song. The wind blows on Squidward's nose, making it touch his face. He pushes it down, but it touches his face again, so he puts it in his mouth. SpongeBob keeps singing and gets carried around in the air by the huge winds. Squidward yells at him to let go of that stupid pizza. SpongeBob says he can't because it's for the customer, while still being carried around in the air. Squidward asks who cares about the customer. SpongeBob says he does. Squidward says he doesn't. SpongeBob gasps Squidward's name when the wind stops. He starts flying again. Squidward tells him to let go of the pizza. SpongeBob refuses. He runs over Squidward. Squidward yells in pain and grabs SpongeBob's legs. He tells SpongeBob to let go of the pizza. SpongeBob refuses again, saying it's for the customer. Squidward questions him, but then they catch sight of a tornado nearby. Squidward tells SpongeBob to let go of the pizza as he gets lifted up into the tornado. SpongeBob says no. Squidward looks down and screams. He changes his mind completely and tells SpongeBob to hang onto the pizza. The tornado spits them both out and both scream while falling down. SpongeBob uses the pizza as a parachute, but Squidward falls hard onto the ground. Squidward crawls up asking where the road is. He repeats this question. A tumbleweed rolls by. He declares they're doomed and asks how they're going to get home and which way they should go. SpongeBob lands. Squidward points out there's no road here. SpongeBob thinks town is in a particular direction and points. Squidward sarcastically calls him Jethro and asks if it's the pioneers. SpongeBob confirms and points to a mossy rock, explaining that moss always points to civilization. Squidward asks if SpongeBob means that way and points. SpongeBob nods. Squidward asks if SpongeBob thinks they should go that way. SpongeBob nods again and says yes. Squidward announces he's going the other way and heads off. SpongeBob questions this and tries to say something, but Squidward cuts him off, saying to trust him because he knows where he's going. The camera pans out to show another city in the direction SpongeBob pointed. SpongeBob starts singing again, saying the Krusty Krab pizza is the pizza absolutely. Later, he continues with just the word pizza and starts beatboxing. Even later, SpongeBob walks backwards. His pants almost split into two and move up and down while he continues beatboxing. Later, SpongeBob sings with blues rock soul style, extending the words dramatically with falsetto at the end. Later, both SpongeBob and Squidward look weary, and SpongeBob sings exhaustingly about crab pizza. Even later, they are both lying face down in the sand. Squidward says they have to eat something. SpongeBob says he heard that in times of hardship, the pioneers would eat coral. Squidward eats some coral. SpongeBob says maybe it wasn't coral. Squidward spits out the coral. SpongeBob suggests maybe it was sand, then mud. Squidward demands SpongeBob give him the pizza. SpongeBob claims he remembers now that it was coral. Squidward demands SpongeBob give it to him. SpongeBob refuses, reminding Squidward they promised it's for the customer. Fancy music plays as Squidward agrees that SpongeBob is right and it's for the customer. SpongeBob agrees happily. Squidward suggests maybe they better check on it to make sure it's okay. SpongeBob asks for Squidward's assessment. Squidward says just a peek and opens the box. SpongeBob shuts it quickly and says it's fine. Squidward claims he thinks he saw something and opens the box again. He says he was wrong and it looks okay. He adds that it's a fine-looking pizza. SpongeBob says yeah, while entranced. Squidward asks if that's the cheese. SpongeBob says yeah. Squidward asks if that's the pepperoni. SpongeBob says yeah. SpongeBob makes a slurping sound. Squidward asks if it looks good. SpongeBob suddenly snaps out of it and announces he knows what Squidward is trying to do. He closes the box and says he's not letting Squidward eat the pizza. Squidward demands SpongeBob give him the pizza. SpongeBob refuses. Squidward warns SpongeBob not to make him take it away. SpongeBob tells him to get away and runs off. Squidward chases SpongeBob, demanding he get back and give him the pizza. SpongeBob keeps saying no. Squidward calls his name repeatedly while SpongeBob keeps refusing. Squidward tells him to wait as he becomes too tired to run. SpongeBob keeps saying no and runs into Squidward. Squidward announces he wants that pizza and SpongeBob is going to hand it over one way or another. SpongeBob points out they're saved. Squidward sarcastically agrees they're saved and demands pizza. SpongeBob insists that really they're saved. He repeats this multiple times while jumping in and out of his pants. Squidward yells at him to cut that out. SpongeBob says saved repeatedly to a conga beat while doing a backflip and push-ups. He rips himself apart, the two parts go in circles, then connect again while he keeps saying saved. He starts doing a conga dance while continuing to chant about being saved. Squidward calls it just a stupid boulder. SpongeBob says it's not just a boulder. He sniffs emotionally and declares it's a rock. He cries and hugs the boulder while repeating that it's a rock. He climbs up it, panting from exhaustion. He calls it a big, beautiful old rock. He sits on the rock with tears in his eyes and taps the pizza box with his fingers. He explains the pioneers used to ride these babies for miles. He rubs the rock and says it's in great shape. Squidward angrily tells SpongeBob to forget the stupid pioneers. He asks if SpongeBob ever noticed there are none of them left. The camera zooms out as he explains that's because they were lousy hitchhikers, ate coral, and took directions from algae. He asks if now SpongeBob is telling him they thought they could drive rocks. SpongeBob runs over Squidward with the boulder. Squidward stands up and runs towards SpongeBob, telling him to hold on there. They stop outside the customer's house. SpongeBob says he can't wait to see the look on their customer's face. He rings the doorbell and gives a thumbs up to Squidward. The customer opens the door and just says yeah. SpongeBob congratulates him and announces his Krabby Patty pizza is here. The customer smiles and says wow, thanks, adding he's been dying for one of these. He suddenly frowns after a brief pause and asks where his drink is. SpongeBob looks confused and asks what drink. The customer uses an angered tone asking about his drink, specifically his Diet Dr. Kelp. He demands to know if SpongeBob forgot his drink. SpongeBob checks through the order and sees no drink listed. He starts to say the customer didn't order any drink. The customer yells furiously, asking how he's supposed to eat this pizza without his drink. SpongeBob tries to respond, but tears start rolling down his face. The customer asks if SpongeBob ever once thought of the customer. He throws the pizza box at SpongeBob's face. He questions if SpongeBob calls himself a delivery boy and declares he's not buying. He slams the door. SpongeBob goes over to Squidward, smiling nervously, shaking, and trying not to cry. Squidward says SpongeBob's name and hops off the rock to console him. He keeps repeating SpongeBob's name and tells him it's okay. SpongeBob drops the pizza box, falls over, and starts sobbing loudly. He absorbs his tears over and over. Squidward remains concerned and keeps pointing at him while still trying to say something. SpongeBob continues crying. This makes Squidward become furious at the customer. He grabs the pizza, marches toward the house, and furiously pounds on the door. The customer answers, still initially angered. He asks if this is another one and says he told SpongeBob's little friend he's not paying for that. Squidward, shown from the customer's point of view, announces this one is on the house. He violently slams the pizza box in the customer's face. SpongeBob is about to stop crying but still lies on the ground in tears. He asks if the customer changed his mind. Squidward smugly confirms he sure did. SpongeBob stops crying and cheers up. Squidward adds that the customer ate the whole thing in one bite. SpongeBob smiles, gets up, and asks if there was no drink. Squidward says nah, and tells SpongeBob to take him home. Both jump up on the rock. SpongeBob asks if Squidward is kidding because they have just enough time to make it back to work. He backs up the rock, and they're instantly at the Krusty Krab. Squidward questions having to go to work. The screen cuts to black as Squidward complains about his aching tentacles. Pizza delivery earned its place among the greatest SpongeBob episodes because it perfectly captured what made the show special in its early seasons. The episode took SpongeBob's dedication to his job and pushed it to an extreme that revealed his character's core values. Throughout the entire journey, SpongeBob never once considered abandoning the pizza or eating it himself, despite facing a tornado, getting lost in the wilderness, and walking for what appears to be an entire day and night. His commitment to the customer remained absolute, even when that commitment made no logical sense. Squidward's character arc provided the emotional weight that elevated the episode beyond simple comedy. He started the episode wanting nothing more than to go home and complained constantly throughout the delivery. He tried multiple times to convince SpongeBob to give up or eat the pizza themselves. When SpongeBob attempted his pioneer tricks, Squidward mocked him repeatedly. The moss pointing to civilization led to Squidward deliberately going the opposite direction just to spite SpongeBob's advice. The episode showed Squidward at his most selfish and irritable. The customer's reaction created the emotional climax that justified the entire journey. After everything SpongeBob endured to deliver that pizza, after walking through a tornado and across miles of desert, after protecting it from Squidward's hunger and using it as a parachute, the customer rejected it because of a drink that was never ordered. The customer's anger about the missing drink revealed someone who cared nothing about the effort involved in the delivery. He saw only what was missing rather than appreciating what was delivered. When he threw the pizza box at SpongeBob's face and slammed the door, he dismissed all of SpongeBob's dedication with complete contempt. SpongeBob's breakdown felt earned because the episode spent its entire runtime establishing how much this delivery meant to him. He absorbed his tears over and over while crying, physically embodying his complete devastation. This moment transformed Squidward completely. Squidward's decision to slam the pizza in the customer's face represented the most heroic moment in his character's history up to that point. After spending the entire episode being selfish, mocking SpongeBob, trying to eat the pizza, and deliberately going the wrong direction, Squidward chose to defend SpongeBob even though it gained him nothing. He grabbed the pizza, marched to the house, and violently slammed it in the customer's face while announcing it was on the house. This action meant Squidward would get no payment, no tip, and no acknowledgement for the delivery. He did it purely because seeing SpongeBob cry made him furious at the customer's cruelty. When SpongeBob asked if the customer changed his mind, Squidward lied and said he ate the whole thing in one bite with no drink. He gave SpongeBob the happy ending he deserved, even if it meant lying about what actually happened. The episode succeeded because it earned its emotional beats through careful storytelling and character development. SpongeBob's dedication never wavered across the entire episode. The Krusty Krab pizza song became iconic because SpongeBob sang it during the worst parts of the journey, maintaining his enthusiasm even when lost in the desert. His pioneer tricks came from genuine belief rather than irony or mockery. When he found the boulder and called it a rock with tears in his eyes, declaring the pioneers used to ride them for miles, his emotion felt genuine. The episode presented SpongeBob's dedication as something pure and worthy of respect rather than something to mock. Squidward's transformation worked because the episode showed his gradual realization that SpongeBob's dedication meant something. His final act of slamming the pizza in the customer's face and lying to SpongeBob about what happened demonstrated that even Squidward recognized SpongeBob deserved better treatment than what he received. Pizza Delivery joined Band Geeks as one of the defining episodes of SpongeBob SquarePants because both episodes took simple premises and transformed them into stories about characters revealing their true natures under pressure. The episode proved that SpongeBob worked best when it respected its characters and gave them real emotional stakes. The journey across the desert, the tornado, the failed hitchhiking attempt, and the customer's cruel rejection all built towards Squidward's heroic moment. The frozen image of the pizza being slammed in the customer's face became as iconic as Squidward's triumphant jump in Band Geeks because both moments represented characters achieving something meaningful. Pizza Delivery showed audiences that dedication and loyalty matter even when nobody appreciates them, and that sometimes the greatest heroism comes from defending someone else's efforts rather than seeking glory for yourself. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Chocolate with Nuts, Season 3, Episode 12A. Chocolate with Nuts aired on the 1st of June 2002 as the first half of the 52nd episode of SpongeBob SquarePants Season 3. The episode earned 4.33 million viewers and became one of the most beloved episodes in the entire series. When fans discuss the greatest SpongeBob episodes alongside Band Geeks and Pizza Delivery, chocolate with nuts consistently earns its place in that conversation. The episode takes the simple concept of door-to-door chocolate bar sales and transforms it into a masterclass in comedic escalation and character-driven humor that works on multiple levels for all ages. The episode opens with SpongeBob sitting inside his mailbox, happily humming. He checks his watch, the mailman arrives, opens the mailbox, and SpongeBob suddenly pops out. SpongeBob greets the mailman cheerfully. The mailman drops his mail, screams in terror, and runs away. SpongeBob says okay, and tells him he'll see him tomorrow as he gets out of the mailbox. Patrick walks up and notes the mail arrived. He asks what SpongeBob got. SpongeBob looks through the mail and lists Gary's name repeatedly before finding a magazine. He notes he doesn't remember subscribing to Fancy Living Digest. SpongeBob and Patrick look inside the magazine together and both say, "Whoa." SpongeBob looks at glossy depictions of a higher standard of living. A picture shows a rich person's swimming pool that has an inflatable pool floating in the water. SpongeBob points out this guy is so rich he has a swimming pool in his swimming pool. Another picture shows an old rich person surrounded with bags of money. Patrick points at the man's feet and notes the guy has shoes. Squidward takes the magazine out of SpongeBob's hands and accuses them of stealing his mail. He tells them they're lucky he doesn't report them to the authorities. SpongeBob asks Squidward how the people in that magazine get all that money. Squidward explains they're entrepreneurs who sell things to people. SpongeBob asks what kind of things. Squidward asks how he should know and says things people want to buy. He walks off telling them to keep their paws off his mail. SpongeBob announces that's it and tells Patrick they have to become entrepreneurs. Patrick asks if that's going to hurt. SpongeBob tells Patrick to quickly answer without thinking what he would want if he could have anything in the world right now. Patrick sweats and says more time for thinking. SpongeBob clarifies he means something real, an item, something Patrick would pay for. Patrick pops up behind him, suggesting a chocolate bar. SpongeBob calls this a great idea and declares they'll become traveling chocolate bar salesmen. The scene changes to SpongeBob and Patrick exiting the bargain mart carrying many chocolate bars. SpongeBob announces Fancy Living is coming. Patrick tells people to make way for a couple of entrepreneurs while mispronouncing the word. SpongeBob and Patrick walk up to a house. SpongeBob tells Patrick this is it and explains this is the first step on their road to living fancy. He says to just follow his lead. SpongeBob runs up and knocks on the door. A customer opens the door. SpongeBob greets him and asks if they could interest him in some chocolate while holding up a chocolate bar. The customer asks if SpongeBob said chocolate. Patrick confirms yes and holds up 2 chocolate bars, asking with or without nuts. The customer repeats chocolate and begins screaming the word chocolate repeatedly. SpongeBob and Patrick slowly back away and then run off. The customer chases them while madly screaming chocolate. The scene cuts to SpongeBob ringing the doorbell of another house. SpongeBob says okay and notes the first guy didn't count, so this is their real first step. Another customer opens the door. SpongeBob greets him and asks if he would like to buy some chocolate. The customer repeats chocolate bars questioningly. SpongeBob confirms yes and says they are chocolate bar salesmen. The customer laughs and calls them a couple of mediocre salesmen. He points out that's no way to carry their merchandise. Patrick is shown holding many chocolate bars in his pants and quickly looks at them. The customer says no repeatedly and declares it's wrong. He asks if they want to be good salesmen. SpongeBob and Patrick both say, "Oh, most certainly, sir." The customer chuckles and says no self-respecting candy bar salesman would be caught dead without one of these. He holds up a bright orange bag. SpongeBob asks, "Wow," and questions what it is. The customer calls him a knucklehead and explains it's a candy bar bag specially designed to cradle each candy bar in velvet-lined comfort. SpongeBob tries to touch it. The customer pulls the bag away and says he's wasting his time while walking inside. He adds, "They don't need these bags." SpongeBob and Patrick both shout they need them. The customer grins. The scene changes to the customer counting money while SpongeBob and Patrick walk away with armfuls of bags. The customer tells them so long and happy hunting. He laughs when the two are not looking and calls them suckers. He walks back inside and closes the door. SpongeBob and Patrick sing about fancy living as they run off. SpongeBob suggests they try next door. He walks up and rings the doorbell with his foot. The same customer comes out. SpongeBob looks suspicious and asks if he was the same guy who sold them these candy bar bags. The customer says he doesn't recall, but notes it looks like they have a lot of bags there. He calls them lady killers and says they're too smart to be without one of his patented candy bar bag-carrying bags. He holds up 2 large maroon bags. Patrick announces they'll take 20. The scene changes to SpongeBob knocking on the door of a different house. A woman comes out and asks what she can do for 2 nice young men. SpongeBob says they're selling chocolate bars and asks if she would like to buy one. The woman says that sounds heavenly and she'll take one. SpongeBob announces one chocolate bar coming up. He opens up a bag, only to find another bag. He keeps trying to find the chocolate while making confused sounds. Patrick is zipping and unzipping his pants. SpongeBob says he knows they're in here somewhere. The woman looks at her watch and says she doesn't have time for this. She goes back inside. SpongeBob suddenly pulls out a chocolate bar and announces he has it. He starts to say one chocolate bar for the nice lady, but sees something off camera. It's revealed to be the first customer still screaming chocolate. The customer screams chocolate repeatedly. He chases SpongeBob and Patrick as chocolates fly out of their bags while they run for their lives. After a bubble transition, SpongeBob and Patrick sit in a diner. SpongeBob says they're not doing so well and they need a new approach, a new tactic. Patrick says he has it and suggests they get naked. SpongeBob tells him no and says to save that for when they're selling real estate. He questions what the reason was that they bought those bags. Patrick remembers the man said they were mediocre. SpongeBob announces that's it because the man made them feel special. Patrick agrees the man did. Patrick says he's going back to buy more bags and runs to the door. SpongeBob tells him to wait. Patrick freezes in place. SpongeBob asks why they don't try being nice. Patrick says okay. The scene changes to SpongeBob and Patrick walking up to a customer's door. SpongeBob reminds Patrick to flatter the customer and make him feel good. Patrick knocks on the door. A customer opens the door and says hello. Patrick says I love you. A harp plays. The customer stares at SpongeBob and Patrick for a few seconds, then slams his door shut in disgust. A tuba plays after the slamming. SpongeBob thinks Patrick laid it on a teensy bit thick there. He says, let him try, and rings the doorbell. The same customer opens the door and begs them to go away. SpongeBob clears his throat and asks how the customer is doing. The customer repeats the question, asking how he is doing. SpongeBob asks if he wants to buy some chocolate. Patrick announces they have him now. The customer says sorry, but chocolate has sugar, and sugar turns to bubbling fat. He asks if that's right, while addressing Loverboy. Patrick's belly is bubbling. Patrick giggles and says it tickles. The customer says, as they can see, him and chocolate no longer hang. He holds up a picture of himself being obese at age 13. He adds they can keep that for $5. Patrick announces he'll take 10. SpongeBob walks with a sad look on his face while sad music plays. He says they haven't sold one chocolate bar, and he has a feeling they're too easily distracted. The scene cuts to Patrick staring at the pictures. There's a far cut showing them separated. SpongeBob raises his fist and says they should make a pact right now that they will stay focused on selling at the next house. Patrick removes the pictures from his face and asks what. SpongeBob holds out his hand and says they should shake on it. Patrick looks at SpongeBob confused and asks if he said something. The scene cuts to another customer's house with SpongeBob and Patrick entering the view. SpongeBob reminds Patrick about focus. SpongeBob knocks on the door. A customer answers and says yes. SpongeBob greets him and says they're selling chocolate bars. Patrick somehow moves up to the customer, with his eyes going in and out back and forth. The customer asks why the chubby one is staring at him. Patrick says he's focusing. The customer freaks out and tells him to back up. He slams the door on Patrick's eyes. Patrick says oof and moves his eyes around. He compliments the nice place the customer has. After a bubble transition, Patrick eats a chocolate bar. SpongeBob says he can't understand what they're doing wrong. Patrick says he can't understand anything. SpongeBob says there must be something to this selling game they're just not getting. He notes other people do it and tells Patrick to look at something. Patrick reads a sign saying, "Eat barnacle chips, they're delicious." SpongeBob declares they are most certainly not delicious. Patrick smiles and says not the way he uses them. SpongeBob points out yet they sell millions of bags a day. Patrick suggests maybe if they didn't stretch the truth, they wouldn't sell as many. SpongeBob happily announces that's it and says they have to stretch the truth. The chocolate-obsessed customer appears screaming chocolate. SpongeBob and Patrick run off. The scene cuts to another house. SpongeBob says they'll work as a team. He explains he'll get the customer warmed up and then Patrick comes in for the kill. Patrick repeats the word kill. SpongeBob uses the doorbell. A woman answers and says yes. SpongeBob greets the young lady and winks at Patrick, who chuckles. He says they're selling chocolate and gets a closer look at someone, asking if the woman's mother is home. The woman calls for her mom. An extremely elderly woman enters from the right side of the house in a wheelchair. She is shriveled up to the point where she appears to be merely a head and a spine. She asks what all the yelling is about. SpongeBob and Patrick have stunned looks on their faces. The elderly woman asks if they just can't wait for her to die. The younger woman explains they're selling chocolate. The elderly woman asks chocolate questioningly. The younger woman confirms, yeah. The elderly woman asks what they're selling. The younger woman says chocolates. The elderly woman says what? The younger woman repeats chocolates. The elderly woman says she can't hear. The younger woman shouts they're selling chocolates. The elderly woman asks if they're selling chocolate. The younger woman confirms, yeah. A close-up shows the elderly woman smiling. She says chocolate and remembers when they first invented chocolate, calling it sweet, sweet chocolate. She adds she always hated it. SpongeBob sweats and says, oh, but this chocolate is not for eating. Patrick comes from the top left, announcing you rub it on your skin and it makes you live forever. The younger woman is heard constantly saying no. The elderly woman asks live forever and says she'll take one. The younger woman slaps her face. The scene cuts to outside where the younger woman pays SpongeBob $1. The elderly woman from inside the house tells the lazy Mary to start rubbing her with that chocolate. Mary looks at SpongeBob and Patrick angrily and says she hates them. She slams the door. SpongeBob announces if they keep exaggerating the truth, they'll be fancy living in no time. Patrick raises his fist and cheers for lying. After a bubble transition, SpongeBob tells a customer it'll make his hair grow. The customer says, great, because his wife is trying to grow a beard. SpongeBob tells another customer they'll make him sound smart. The customer with a southern accent announces he'll take 20. Patrick tells a customer it'll keep his face from getting any uglier. Another Patrick appears, saying just in time. SpongeBob and Patrick go through rapid claims. SpongeBob says they'll make you fly. Patrick says you'll fall in love. SpongeBob says they'll bring world peace. Patrick says you'll walk through walls. SpongeBob says with an echoing voice that you'll rule the world. The scene cuts to a door where SpongeBob and Patrick are wrapped in casts. Patrick says this'll be the best lie yet. SpongeBob agrees and says this guy will feel so sorry for them he'll have to buy all their chocolate. A customer opens the door slightly and asks what he can do for them. SpongeBob greets him and asks if he would like to buy a chocolate bar, adding they need an operation. The customer says really questioningly. The customer is revealed to be in a cast covering his entire body. He limps out of the door at his doorstep. He comments it's a small world and asks what's the matter with them. SpongeBob nervously says they have some head trauma and eternal bleeding. The customer says some guys have all the luck. A violin begins playing. The customer explains he was born with glass bones and paper skin. He says every morning he breaks his legs and every afternoon he breaks his arms. SpongeBob and Patrick both have faces, meaning they were about to cry. The customer continues that at night he lies awake in agony until his heart attacks put him to sleep. A tear runs down SpongeBob's face. The customer's wires snap and he's about to fall. A glass-breaking sound is heard as the customer grunts while hitting the steps. He says, ow, on the last step. SpongeBob tells Patrick to help him quickly. The scene cuts to inside the house where SpongeBob and Patrick enter from the left carrying the customer. SpongeBob says careful and to put him down gently. Patrick drops the customer's head with a glass-breaking sound heard. The customer says ow in pain. SpongeBob calls him a poor, poor man and says if there's anything they can do to help. The customer says there is one thing. He explains that as they can imagine, his medical bills are extremely high, but luckily he is able to keep himself alive by selling chocolate bars. He gestures his head over to a massive stack of chocolate bar boxes. After a bubble transition, the customer looks out his window as SpongeBob and Patrick walk by. He calls them such nice boys. A close-up shows the customer laughing while looking at his cash. He unzips his costume to reveal himself as the same person from earlier who sold SpongeBob and Patrick the bags to hold the chocolate bars. He says it does his heart good to con a couple of Class A sucker-roonies like those two and laughs. The scene cuts to the street. SpongeBob grunts and tells Patrick not to get him wrong, because it's great they helped that guy out, but there's no one left in town to sell chocolate bars to. He trips on a rock and falls. He makes another grunting noise with a box flat on his face. He tells Patrick they should face it because they're failures. Patrick walks in from the left carrying a box and says he can live with that. He places his box on SpongeBob's box and sits on it, making a small squeaking sound. SpongeBob suggests they change their names to Why and Bother. The chocolate-obsessed customer appears behind the box screaming chocolate. His screaming knocks SpongeBob, Patrick, and the boxes over. SpongeBob and Patrick babble and beg him not to hurt them and to have mercy. The customer laughs manically. He announces finally because he's been trying to catch them all day. He says now that he has them right where he wants them, he'd like to buy all their chocolate. He holds up a large amount of cash. SpongeBob and Patrick look shocked. Chocolate bars fall out of Patrick's shorts along with a candy item. SpongeBob and Patrick are shown melting. SpongeBob thanks him for his patronage. After a bubble transition, Patrick pushes a wheelbarrow full of cash. Patrick asks if they're living the fancy life yet. The money in the barrel is shown with SpongeBob popping out. SpongeBob says not yet and explains first they have to spend all the money. Patrick asks what they're going to spend it on. SpongeBob thinks about it. After a bubble transition, a boat in a bottle with the word fancy on top is shown at night. The scene cuts to inside the boat. Squidward walks in and greets someone, asking for a table for one. A waiter says, "Sorry, but the whole restaurant has been rented to a private party." Squidward looks shocked. He says it's his only night to be fancy and asks who could afford to rent out the whole restaurant. The waiter explains a couple of rich entrepreneurs and their dates. The scene shows SpongeBob, Patrick, Mary, and the elderly woman. Mary is seen holding a glass. SpongeBob asks how long the two ladies have known each other. The elderly woman asks what and questions what he said. The screen fades to black. Chocolate with Nuts earned its reputation as one of the greatest SpongeBob episodes because it mastered the art of escalating absurdity while maintaining perfect character consistency throughout. The episode took SpongeBob and Patrick's childlike innocence and showed how that innocence could be both exploited and ultimately rewarded. Every interaction built upon the previous one, creating a structure where each failed sales attempt taught them something that led to the next approach. The con artist character, who kept appearing in different disguises, demonstrated how easily SpongeBob and Patrick could be manipulated because of their genuine desire to succeed and help others. His repeated scams with the candy bar bags, the bag-carrying bags, and finally the elaborate medical condition con showed escalating exploitation that made his ultimate fate more satisfying. The chocolate-obsessed customer who chased them throughout the episode provided both a running gag and the ultimate payoff. His terrifying pursuit created genuine stakes because SpongeBob and Patrick spent most of the episode running from him in fear. When he finally cornered them at the end and they begged for mercy, the reveal that he simply wanted to buy all their chocolate transformed him from antagonist to savior. This twist worked because the episode earned it through consistent character behavior. The customer never stopped pursuing what he wanted, and his determination matched SpongeBob's dedication to selling chocolate. The progression of their sales tactics showed character growth within a single episode. They started with straightforward honesty, got conned into buying unnecessary equipment, tried excessive flattery, attempted focus, and finally embraced lying and exaggeration. Each approach failed in ways specific to that approach. The honesty got them chased, the flattering was too intense, the focus was creepy, and the lies escalated to dangerous levels with the fake injuries. The elderly woman scene with Mary provided the turning point where they discovered that exaggeration could work, even though it created an uncomfortable situation where Mary clearly hated them for taking advantage of her mother. SpongeBob's optimism throughout their failures made the eventual success meaningful. Even when declaring they were failures and suggesting they change their names to Why and Bother, he maintained the core belief that they were trying to accomplish something worthwhile. Patrick's consistent confusion and willingness to suggest increasingly absurd solutions like getting naked or the skin-rubbing claim created comedy that never undermined the emotional stakes. His declaration of hooray for lying after their first successful sale captured both the innocence and the moral ambiguity of their journey. The ending at the fancy restaurant brought the story full circle from the Fancy Living Digest magazine that started their journey. Squidward's appearance created the perfect final joke because he spent the entire episode absent while they struggled, yet his desire for fancy living mirrored theirs. His discovery that SpongeBob and Patrick achieved what he wanted, renting out an entire restaurant with their dates, delivered the satisfying conclusion that their persistence paid off. The elderly woman's inability to hear SpongeBob's question provided the final gag that maintained the episode's comedic tone even in their moment of triumph. Chocolate with Nuts succeeded because it understood that great comedy comes from character-driven situations where each joke serves the story. The episode never relied on randomness or cruelty for its humor. Every failed sale happened for specific character-based reasons that made sense within the episode's internal logic. The con artist's ability to fool them repeatedly worked because SpongeBob and Patrick genuinely wanted to learn how to be better salesmen. Their willingness to lie came from seeing how other products succeeded through dishonesty rather than from malice. The episode presented a journey from innocence through corruption back to success that worked as both comedy and character study, earning its place alongside Band Geeks and Pizza Delivery as one of the defining episodes of SpongeBob SquarePants. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Next up we have Krusty Krab Training Video, Season 3, Episode 10B. Krusty Krab Training Video aired on the 10th of May 2002 as the second half of the 50th episode of SpongeBob SquarePants Season 3. The episode earned 3.86 million viewers and became one of the most creative and memorable episodes in the entire series. When fans discuss the greatest SpongeBob episodes, Krusty Krab Training Video stands out for its unique format and brilliant comedic structure. The episode presents itself as an actual corporate training video for new Krusty Krab employees, complete with a narrator who guides viewers through every aspect of working at the restaurant, What makes this episode exceptional is how it uses this documentary format to create comedy that builds throughout the entire runtime before delivering one of the most famous endings in television history. The episode opens with a montage of various aspects of the Krusty Krab. A narrator welcomes the viewer aboard and offers congratulations. A rainbow with the word congratulations appears on screen. The narrator explains that if someone is watching this video, they've recently been hired by the Krusty Krab restaurant and this is their first official day of training. A spatula, hat, and bucket appear in SpongeBob's hands. SpongeBob immediately asks if he can make a Krabby Patty now. The narrator says, "Oh no," and explains SpongeBob has a lot to learn before he's ready to make a Krabby Patty. The narrator says, as you can see by this graph, the scene cuts to a giraffe. The narrator clears his throat and corrects himself, saying graph. A proper graph is shown with the Krusty Krab moving up along the graph line. The narrator explains viewers are now employed by one of the most successful restaurants in Bikini Bottom, but it didn't get that way overnight. The scene turns to nighttime as the narrator adds, that's because the store closes at 6 o'clock. The scene cuts to a picture of Mr. Krabs with the Krusty Krab behind him. The narrator explains that the story of the Krusty Krab is the story of one man's hard work, perseverance, vision, determination, and sweat. The scene zooms toward Mr. Krabs' armpits. The narrator adds, but mostly his sweat. A transition slide appears with the words, "From humble beginnings." The scene cuts to a sepia picture of Mr. Krabs as a child, singing along as he walks up to a soda machine with a quarter in his hand. The narrator suggests viewers may think that Mr. Eugene H. Krabs, owner and founder of Krusty Krab Incorporated, has always been the financial wizard he is today. Young Mr. Krabs puts in his quarter, then pulls it back out, revealing it's attached to a piece of string. The narrator confirms viewers are right about that assumption. Young Mr. Krabs laughs while drinking his soda. The scene cuts to a tired Mr. Krabs sitting depressed in a room with light at the window. The narrator explains that after the war, Krabs stayed secluded in a deep depression that seemed endless. The scene cuts to the Krusty Krab, now shown as a retirement home with elderly fish outside playing shuffleboard. The narrator explains his luck changed when he acquired a bankrupt retirement home, and with a few minor alterations, the Krusty Krab was born. Mr. Krabs paints a giant K with red paint on a sign outside that reads, "The Rusty Krab." A baby crying sound is heard in the background. The scene cuts to a Krabby Patty with light shining on it. The narrator starts to say this sounds like a lot of something. A fish interrupts from off-screen, shouting hoopla. The narrator tries again to say sounds like a lot. The fish interrupts again with hoopla. The narrator tries once more saying sounds like a... The fish still interrupts with hoopla. The fish scrolls over yelling while sticking out a hand and making a megaphone-shaped mouth, shouting hoopla. Someone off-screen throws a brick at the fish, knocking him unconscious. The screen scrolls back to the patty. The narrator asks if this sounds like a lot of hoopla to make over a little Krabby Patty, right? He chuckles, then shouts wrong while the screen shakes. A transition slide appears with the words, "The Krusty Krab today." The scene cuts to a montage of close-ups in the Krusty Krab similar to the episode intro. Then the scene shows the inside of the Krusty Krab, where customers are eating Krabby Patties. The narrator explains that to keep up with today's demanding customers, no expense has been spared to acquire all the latest achievements in fast food technology. Mr. Krabs holds up a spatula in his hand and calls it an advanced patty control mechanism. He stands at the register pointing out their automated money handling system, warning not to touch. He holds up some ice cubes and identifies them as high-quality beverage temperature devices, adding they're imported. He holds up a straw, calling it a prototype liquid transfer machine. He puts the straw in the cup and drinks from it. He says most importantly, and holds up some ketchup packets, calling them state-of-the-art condiment dispersal units. He asks if the viewer is going to buy something or just stand there because there's a standing fee. SpongeBob is shown standing when a packet of ketchup, spatula, cash register, cup, and ice cubes appear around him. The narrator talks about all this modernization seeming a little overwhelming. The items spin around SpongeBob. The narrator says, luckily for viewers, Mr. Krabs' fear of robot overlords keeps the balance of technology in check. The items disappear and SpongeBob floats to the side. The scene changes to SpongeBob standing next to Squidward near the cash register. The narrator explains that if modernization is the heart of the Krusty Krab, then employees are the liver and gallbladder. A close-up shows SpongeBob's face. The narrator examines him, noting poised, confident, and a smile that says, "Hello world, may I take your order?" The narrator tells Mr. SquarePants he has the makings of a good employee. The narrator adds that for every good employee, there's one who is not so good. A close-up shows Squidward reading his dance magazine. He looks bored as he stares at his pages. The narrator lists inattentive, impatient, a glazed look in the eyes. A close-up shows the button Squidward is wearing on his shirt. The narrator tells viewers to look carefully at the "I really wish I weren't here right now" button. The narrator says there's a name for employees like this, but they'll call him Squidward. Squidward asks if he's getting paid overtime for this. Mr. Krabs responds from off-screen in his office that, sorry, he can't hear him. A transition slide appears with the word training. SpongeBob asks if this means he gets to make a Krabby Patty now. The narrator says no and explains SpongeBob can't make a Krabby Patty without understanding the phrase poop. SpongeBob questions the word poop. The narrator explains that once SpongeBob understands poop, he'll understand his place at the Krusty Krab. The narrator asks what poop means. SpongeBob shrugs. The narrator explains it's actually a carefully organized code and tells viewers to watch closely. Text appears revealing, "People order our patties." SpongeBob says "oh" and repeats poop while smiling proudly. The narrator notes that Mr. SquarePants understands poop. The scene cuts to a customer walking up to Squidward. The narrator points out here's a typical customer and wonders what he wants. The narrator says if they just remember poop, they can figure it out. The customer says he'd like to order something and the screen freezes. The narrator asks if viewers think he's going to order A, a sofa, B, an expensive haircut, or C, a patty. The scene resumes with the customer requesting one patty, please. The narrator declares that poop never lets them down. The scene cuts to a giant Krabby Patty. The narrator says now that viewers understand poop, he bets they think they're ready to make a Krabby Patty. SpongeBob shouts Krabby Patty and sprints toward it. But once he gets too close, he gets splattered on the background with a fly swatter. The narrator laughs and calls him Eager McBeaver, noting they haven't even talked about personal hygiene yet. A transition slide appears. The scene cuts to SpongeBob in front of a sink. The narrator explains every employee of the Krusty Krab must comply with a strict set of personal hygiene guidelines. SpongeBob turns the faucet on. The narrator asks if Mr. SquarePants is ready to prepare for his shift. SpongeBob lathers his hands. The narrator says a good employee always scrubs his hands thoroughly and reminds him to be sure to get under those fingernails. SpongeBob nods and scrubs a bit harder. The narrator reminds him not to forget about the knuckles. SpongeBob scrubs a bit harder. The narrator says to make sure those palms are squeaky clean. SpongeBob scrubs as hard as he can. The narrator says all right and asks to see those hands. SpongeBob shows his hands, which are invisible from scrubbing so much. The narrator says now that's thorough and chuckles. The scene cuts to SpongeBob's shiny boots. The narrator says after making sure feet are polished. The scene cuts to a close-up of SpongeBob's face with a boil on his nose. The narrator says the face should be clear of any blemishes or boils. SpongeBob cuts the boil off with scissors. The narrator adds that hair should be neat and tidy. SpongeBob lifts up his hat, sprays a little hairspray on a single hair to make it straight, then puts his hat back on. The narrator announces SpongeBob is ready to start the day and suggests they see how Squidward prepares for his shift. One of the bathroom stall doors opens to show Squidward sleeping on the toilet with his dance magazine on his lap. He notices that people are looking at him. He laughs nervously and slams the stall door shut. The narrator reminds viewers that no employee wants to be a Squidward. A giant Krabby Patty appears on the screen again. The narrator says now that viewers are clean and hygienic, he'll bet they think they're ready to make that Krabby Patty. SpongeBob screams in excitement, saying he's ready. He splits into two SpongeBobs. Both say they're ready. He splits into more SpongeBobs. They all say they're ready. He keeps splitting himself into more SpongeBobs until fly swatters splat all of them on the screen. The narrator says whoa there and explains they have a few more topics to cover first. A transition slide appears with the words, "Your workstation." The scene cuts to SpongeBob vacuuming on top of the stove. The narrator says it's important to keep the area tidy and free of droppings, but a clean workstation is only part of the job. The scene cuts to SpongeBob thinking of a Krabby Patty. The narrator explains that to make the vision in your head a reality, you'll need supplies, and a good employee always keeps his supplies well organized. SpongeBob opens up a cabinet, then opens the bottom drawer to reveal a bunch of folders with names of condiments and ingredients. The narrator compliments this as very nice, noting not a pickle out of place. SpongeBob peeks out the kitchen door. The narrator suggests they see how Squidward keeps his workstation. Squidward's workstation is covered in ketchup and mustard. The octopus is sprawled out sleeping with a dance magazine on his face and a do not disturb sign hanging on his left feet. He wakes up and shouts as the cash register drawer opens up and hits him on the head. He falls to the floor. The narrator tells Squidward not to worry because Mr. SquarePants can cover for him. The scene cuts to SpongeBob standing next to the grill. The narrator says now that the workstation is up and running, perhaps SpongeBob thinks he's ready to make the world-famous Krabby Patty. SpongeBob barks like a dog, then runs around the room. The narrator laughs and tells him to calm down. A bone is thrown at SpongeBob. He grabs it with his teeth and gnaws it. The narrator says there's plenty of time left because they have to make sure SpongeBob is ready for the psychological aspect of the job. A transition slide appears with the words interfacing with your boss. The scene cuts to SpongeBob walking up to Mr. Krabs in his office. Mr. Krabs is writing papers. SpongeBob asks Mr. Krabs if he can have a raise. Mr. Krabs says no. The narrator announces, "Good job, Mr. SquarePants." SpongeBob runs up to the camera asking if he can make a Krabby Patty now. The scene cuts to Patrick walking into the Krusty Krab. The narrator says they now move from behind the scenes to the front lines where they'll examine the most important aspect of the industry, the customer. The narrator adds, or as they like to say, the crustomer. Patrick stops startled and asks who said that and if they're a ghost. The narrator explains that like precious blood in an animal, customers are what keeps the Krusty Krab strong and alive. Patrick walks to Squidward and points at the ceiling, telling Squidward his ceiling is talking to him. Squidward asks if Patrick is going to order something or just make friends with the paneling. Patrick says he'll have something and makes uncertain sounds before falling asleep and snoring. Squidward snaps at Patrick, causing him to wake up. Patrick asks who's there. Squidward tells Patrick to go be stupid somewhere else. The narrator interrupts, reminding Squidward what Mr. Krabs says. A cutout of Mr. Krabs appears, announcing the money is always right. Patrick tells Squidward the ceiling is right and that Squidward is not a very good employee. Squidward says fine and asks if he may please take Patrick's order. Patrick says he'll have something and drones on, making uncertain sounds. Squidward gets mad and grips the cash register. The narrator says they'll check in with these two later. A transition slide appears with the words, "Emergency situation." The scene cuts to SpongeBob standing by a Krabby Patty looking around suspiciously. The narrator explains that, like the lost gold of Atlantis, many consider their Krabby Patty to be a treasure, and as with every treasure, there's a thief ready to steal it. The narrator says so it's up to the employee to be the watchful eyes. The Krabby Patty grows metal legs and walks off. The narrator asks what this is. Plankton is riding on the walking patty. The narrator identifies him as Mr. Krabs' business rival Plankton. Plankton tells them to eat his microscopic dust and declares the secret formula is finally his. The scene cuts to SpongeBob with a shocked face. The narrator announces Plankton is stealing the formula and asks what SpongeBob is going to do. SpongeBob screams in horror and runs around the restaurant. Mr. Krabs walks up to Plankton as he and the patty are going really slow. Plankton brags that Krabs will never catch him, not when he shifts into maximum overdrive. He whips and shouts. The mechanical legs of the Krabby Patty start moving slightly faster. Mr. Krabs walks at normal speed and grabs the patty. Plankton says he knew he should have gotten the turbo. SpongeBob is still running around screaming and knocking over tables and chairs. Plankton tells Krabs to hear him, and that Krabs will take this Krabby Patty from him when Krabs pries it from his cold dead hands. Plankton speaks in a sped-up voice. Mr. Krabs flicks Plankton back to the chum bucket. While Plankton screams, Mr. Krabs sees that SpongeBob is still screaming. The narrator announces another emergency is avoided thanks to Mr. SquarePants. The scene cuts to Squidward and Patrick. Patrick is still droning and Squidward looks annoyed. The narrator whispers to Squidward. Squidward responds questioningly. The narrator reminds him to just remember poop. Squidward tells Patrick that if he could make a suggestion, why doesn't Patrick just order a Krabby Patty? Patrick's face lights up and he calls it a great idea. He orders one Krabby Patty, please. Squidward sighs and asks if that's for here or to go. He closes his mouth in realization. Patrick continues droning. Squidward bangs his head on the register over and over. The narrator tells Squidward to hang in there because it's all part of the job. The scene cuts to a shot of the Krusty Krab training manual. The narrator announces that now that they've covered all the basics of training, it's time for the moment viewers have been waiting for. A blue screen appears with the Krabby Patty slowly coming closer to the screen. The narrator hums a lengthy tune as the Krabby Patty slowly gets closer and closer. He imitates a cymbal crash and continues humming. He gasps for air partway through and continues the tune. He finally announces they're preparing the Krabby Patty. The scene cuts to SpongeBob worshipping a Krabby Patty poster. The narrator explains that at the center of every great dynasty is the crown jewel, which keeps it alive and thriving. For the Krusty Krab, this is the Krabby Patty. SpongeBob licks the poster. The narrator says, now the viewer, the humble employee off the street, the all-too necessary human resource that keeps this business afloat, will learn the sacred and dark secrets of how to prepare with their very own hands. SpongeBob gasps in joy. The narrator describes the Krabby Patty with elaborate adjectives as a pleasure center. He asks if SpongeBob is ready. SpongeBob nods excitedly. The narrator asks if he's sure. SpongeBob nods harder, but half of his face tears apart. The narrator says okay and begins to say the secret formula is. He gets cut off as the episode ends, cutting to credits. Krusty Krab training video earned its reputation as one of the greatest SpongeBob episodes because it took a mundane concept and executed it with perfect comedic timing and structure. The training video format allowed the show to parody corporate culture while simultaneously building toward a payoff that the entire episode promised but never delivered. SpongeBob's repeated question about making a Krabby Patty created a running gag that escalated throughout the episode. Each time he asked, the narrator found new reasons to delay, new topics to cover, new aspects of the job to examine. This created genuine anticipation because viewers wanted to see the payoff just as much as SpongeBob wanted to make that patty. The contrast between SpongeBob as the perfect employee and Squidward as the terrible employee provided consistent comedy that never felt repetitive. Every segment showed SpongeBob executing tasks with enthusiasm and precision, while Squidward failed in increasingly absurd ways. The personal hygiene segment demonstrated this perfectly, with SpongeBob scrubbing his hands until they became invisible while Squidward slept on the toilet with his dance magazine. The workstation comparison showed SpongeBob's perfectly organized ingredient files against Squidward's ketchup and mustard-covered station, where he slept with a Do Not Disturb sign. These contrasts worked because they reflected the characters' established personalities while serving the training video format. The POOP acronym represented the kind of corporate speak that actual training videos use to make simple concepts seem important. People Order Our Patties reduced customer service to its most basic element while treating it as profound wisdom. The scene where the narrator quizzed viewers about whether the customer would order a sofa, an expensive haircut, or a patty demonstrated how training videos often insult viewer intelligence while pretending to educate. Patrick's extended ordering scene with Squidward showed the frustration of dealing with difficult customers while maintaining the documentary format. Squidward's repeated failures to take Patrick's order despite the narrator's reminders about poop illustrated how corporate training rarely prepares employees for real situations. The Plankton emergency situation provided action and stakes within the training video framework. SpongeBob's panicked running around while Mr. Krabs simply walked over and grabbed the slowly moving patty from Plankton showed the difference between perceived emergencies and actual threats. The narrator crediting SpongeBob for avoiding the emergency despite him doing nothing useful added another layer to the corporate training video satire. These videos often praise employees for basic tasks or misattribute success to create false confidence. Mr. Krabs' backstory added surprising depth to what could have been a simple comedy episode. The revelation that he acquired a bankrupt retirement home and converted it into the Krusty Krab with minor alterations gave the restaurant a darkly funny origin story. The image of elderly fish playing shuffleboard outside what would become the Krusty Krab suggested the minimal changes required for this transformation. Young Mr. Krabs using a quarter on a string to get free soda established his cheap nature from childhood. The mention of war and his deep depression added unexpected darkness that the episode immediately undercut with jokes. The ending became one of the most famous in television history because it violated every expectation the episode created. After spending the entire runtime building anticipation for the Krabby Patty preparation, after the narrator's lengthy musical build-up, after asking SpongeBob if he's ready multiple times, the episode cut to credits the instant the narrator began revealing the secret formula. This ending frustrated viewers in the best possible way. The episode trained audiences to expect delay after delay, making them believe the payoff would eventually come. The abrupt ending revealed that the delays were the point. The episode was never going to show the Krabby Patty preparation because the anticipation was funnier than any payoff could be. The training video format allowed the episode to comment on corporate culture, fast food industry practices, and the nature of episodic television all at once. Every segment examined a different aspect of restaurant work while maintaining the mockumentary style. The personal hygiene obsession, the workstation organization, the boss interaction, the customer service philosophy, and the emergency procedures all reflected real training video topics presented with SpongeBob's absurdist humor. The narrator's authoritative voice and the transition slides with topic names perfectly mimicked actual corporate training materials. Krusty Krab training video succeeded by committing completely to its format while using that format to tell jokes that built upon each other throughout the episode. SpongeBob's increasing desperation to make a Krabby Patty, Squidward's consistent failures as an employee, Patrick's inability to complete a simple order, and the narrator's pompous presentation style all worked together to create an episode that felt different from anything else on television. The ending cemented its place in SpongeBob history by having the confidence to deny viewers what the episode promised, trusting that the journey was entertaining enough to justify the lack of destination. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Wet Painters Season 3, Episode 10A. Wet Painters aired on the 10th of May 2002 as the first half of the 50th episode of SpongeBob SquarePants Season 3. The episode earned 3.86 million viewers and became one of the most beloved episodes in the entire series. When fans discuss the greatest SpongeBob episodes, Wet Painters consistently appears in those conversations because of its perfect tension building, physical comedy, and one of the most satisfying twist endings in the show's history. The episode takes the simple premise of painting a house and transforms it into an exercise in escalating paranoia and anxiety that works as both comedy and a masterclass in storytelling structure. The episode opens with the French narrator announcing a slow day at the Krusty Krab. SpongeBob tells Squidward to check something out. He holds up a patty in each hand and explains these are two ordinary Krabby Patties, but when expertly tossed with the skill of a champ, they become something else. He throws them on the floor and Patrick slides the patties across the room. Patrick announces a one-way ticket to pain. He slams into the wall by Mr. Krabs' office. Mr. Krabs' window breaks off the wall from the impact. Mr. Krabs looks up and puts down his writing. SpongeBob slides while on Patrick's mouth and shouts heave-ho. He slams into the wall and the place shakes. Mr. Krabs exits his office and demands to know what's going on. SpongeBob is on Patrick's mouth. Mr. Krabs explains that time is money, and if the boys are wasting time, then they're wasting money. He walks up to SpongeBob and adds, "That's just sick." SpongeBob explains they were performing a ritual to attract customers, and the only way the ritual can work is for them to get hurt real bad. Mr. Krabs asks what stupid barnacle told them that. Squidward laughs and nervously covers his face with a magazine. Mr. Krabs says instead of killing themselves, he has something real important for them to do. The scene cuts to the three of them standing in front of Mr. Krabs' house. Mr. Krabs asks if they're ready for their super. SpongeBob and Patrick repeat super. Mr. Krabs says special. SpongeBob and Patrick repeat special. Mr. Krabs whispers secret. SpongeBob and Patrick whisper secret with their faces shrunk. Mr. Krabs announces assignment. SpongeBob and Patrick scream nearly incoherently. Patrick begs Mr. Krabs to put them out of their misery. SpongeBob says he has to know repeatedly. Mr. Krabs announces the two of them are to paint the inside of his house. He opens his front door. SpongeBob and Patrick both jump with excitement, saying yay. Mr. Krabs tells them to let him give them a warning. He explains this paint is absolutely permanent. He shoves paint cans towards SpongeBob and Patrick while showing them. He says it will never come off, so if he sees even one drop on anything but wall, he'll have their rear ends cut off and mounted over his fireplace. He holds up two empty plaques with their names on them. He tells them to have fun with the job and shuts the door with them inside his house. SpongeBob says Patrick's name. Patrick responds asking what? They see Mr. Krabs' wall, which is covered head to toe in memorabilia. SpongeBob notes Mr. Krabs sure has a lot of expensive treasures to drip paint on. He puts his paint on the floor and asks if they should take this stuff off the walls. Patrick puts his paint on the floor as well and says no way, explaining they're not getting paid to move stuff. SpongeBob points out they're not getting paid at all. Patrick says, well, that's what he said, announcing they're not getting paid and that's final. SpongeBob says okay and suggests they'll just paint around all this stuff. Patrick says good and tells SpongeBob not to pay him. SpongeBob says first they need to set up the tarp. He holds up a tarp. Patrick announces tarp ahoy and spreads the tarp on the floor, but the camera reveals it's a tiny piece. SpongeBob says they're going to need more coverage. The scene cuts to 11 pieces of the same size tarp spread on the floor. SpongeBob says now that's what he's talking about. He guesses they should open these cans of permanent paint now. Patrick adds that it will never, ever come off. SpongeBob says, and if they get it on anything, Mr. Krabs will cut their butts off. Patrick finishes by saying, and mount them on the wall. SpongeBob takes a screwdriver and tries opening the lid. Patrick keeps repeating careful SpongeBob over and over, getting louder until he's yelling. SpongeBob holds the lid and tells Patrick the lid is already off. Patrick says, oh, and announces now it's his turn. He takes out a battle axe and hits the paint can with it. SpongeBob grabs the can and says he's thinking he should do this one too. SpongeBob carefully opens up the lid. When he does, a paint drop bounces on the tarp. Both scream as the paint drop bounces on a tarp, and again as the drop bounces on every tarp and then back into the can. Patrick says, well, that was a ripoff. SpongeBob wipes sweat off. SpongeBob says okay and tells Patrick to get their brushes ready. He holds up his big brush and suggests maybe they should start with a smaller brush. He throws the big brush to the right, then takes another small brush and gets a hair out of his nose. Patrick does the same, but out comes a large bunch of nose hairs. SpongeBob dips the brush into the can and then faces the wall. He tells Patrick they have to get started painting this wall with the permanent paint that they aren't allowed to get on anything but the wall. He says, well, here we go. The French narrator announces 1 hour later. SpongeBob is still standing in the same spot while sweating nervously. He says just a few more seconds of mental preparation and he'll be painting this wall. The French narrator announces 2 hours later. SpongeBob is still standing in the same spot and sweating, saying he's getting to the painting. The French narrator starts to announce 3 hours later. Patrick is holding the 3 hours later time card and asks if SpongeBob can move it along because he's all out of time cards. SpongeBob is still standing on the same spot and sweating. He says no problem, and here he goes. He makes a line of paint going down the wall and smiles. The paint starts going down, but SpongeBob blows it one direction, then another, until he uses a hairdryer to blow the paint, creating a paint bubble without meaning to. He blows off the steam from the dryer like smoke from a gun and says yeah. He notices the paint bubble and shouts barnacles, asking what could be worse than a giant paint bubble. Patrick says oh, he knows. He takes a wand, dips it in the paint, then blows a big bubble, announcing 2 giant paint bubbles. SpongeBob screams no. The 2 giant paint bubbles merge into one. SpongeBob says Patrick's name. Patrick responds asking what. SpongeBob says he doesn't think this bubble can get much bigger. Patrick says nonsense and inflates the giant bubble with a bicycle pump. SpongeBob tells Pat no. The bubble pops and the paint splatters all over the wall, covering up all the old brown spots. SpongeBob moves out of the way for the last bit of paint to splash on the wall. SpongeBob announces they did it. He checks the area and says they painted the whole house without getting a drop of paint on anything but the wall. He looks shocked and shouts about what he sees. Mr. Krabs' dollar on the wall has a dot of paint on it upon closer inspection. SpongeBob's eyes crack, break, and drip on the floor. He falls over. He then wakes up and his eyes recover. He announces they're dead and asks Patrick if he knows what that is. Patrick thinks and says it's $1, announcing he wins. SpongeBob says that's not just $1, but Mr. Krabs' first dollar, his most prized possession, and they got paint on it. Patrick says he thinks SpongeBob is overreacting because he doesn't see any paint. SpongeBob says okay and notes this isn't a problem. He takes the dollar off the wall and suggests maybe he can just wipe it off. He tries to wipe the paint off with his tie, but makes the paint even more noticeable. He says there and thinks he got it. He notices the paint more. He becomes nervous, so he wipes it more, but the dollar becomes completely covered in paint. He screams. Patrick says, oh, now he sees it. SpongeBob says this is not good repeatedly. He says Mr. Krabs is going to be home soon, and when he sees what they did to his first dollar. The scene cuts to SpongeBob and Patrick's butts on the wall, while Mr. Krabs enjoys some tea by the fire. Both shriek while holding their butts. Patrick tells SpongeBob to wait because all they have to do is wash the paint off and Krabs will never know. SpongeBob starts to say, but Mr. Krabs said something. Patrick puts his hands over SpongeBob's mouth and tells him to forget what Mr. Krabs said. He declares every paint comes off with something. The scene cuts to SpongeBob standing by a washing machine asking if it worked. Patrick comes out from the washing machine with the dollar still with paint on it in his hands. He also has a bra on his head. Patrick says, nope. The scene cuts to SpongeBob sanding the dollar in Patrick's hand, asking if it worked. Patrick's hands are gone. Patrick says, nope. The scene cuts to SpongeBob using a fire hose to shoot a massive stream of water at Patrick, who screams in pain off screen. SpongeBob asks if it worked. Patrick holds up the dollar that left a hole in his body from the force of the water except for the part blocked by his arms. Patrick says, nope. The camera pans along various tools that apparently failed at the task. SpongeBob is beating up the dollar, but Patrick takes the hits, saying oof repeatedly. Later it shows SpongeBob with a baseball bat and Patrick with a black eye and neck brace still holding the dollar. SpongeBob says nothing is working. Patrick tells him to wait because they're not cavemen. He walks over to a computer and announces they have technology. He picks up the computer and angrily grunts as he smashes it on the dollar. SpongeBob says it didn't work. Patrick rants that this is all Mr. Krabs' fault. He complains that if Mr. Krabs hadn't hung that stupid dollar in the first place. He says it's not like it looks any different than a regular dollar, and questions why hang it. He suggests you could just stick any old dollar bill up on the wall and no one would even know the difference. He says you might as well just reach into his wallet, pull out a dollar, and put it on the wall and it would be fine. SpongeBob tells Patrick to hurry and take out his wallet. Patrick says he doesn't see where SpongeBob is going with this. He takes out his wallet and pulls out a dollar, announcing he found a dollar. SpongeBob says their butts are saved and now all they have to do. He stops Patrick, who puts his dollar in a vending machine. SpongeBob asks why Patrick put it in as his dollar comes out. He tells Patrick to grab it repeatedly. Patrick pushes it back in. SpongeBob says no. The dollar comes out again. SpongeBob tells Patrick to get it repeatedly. Patrick forcefully shoves it back in again with both hands. SpongeBob says, "Oh no." Patrick eats a chocolate bar as he approaches an annoyed SpongeBob and asks if he wants a bite. SpongeBob says okay repeatedly and notes they still have time. He looks in a mirror and tells himself not to panic, explaining panic is the enemy. He says he is strong and through his strength he shall overcome. Mr. Krabs is approaching the door while singing off screen. SpongeBob's reflection tells him he's on his own and walks away. SpongeBob screams as he runs in circles around Patrick. He tells Patrick to hurry and put Mr. Krabs' dollar back on the wall, because he has an idea. Mr. Krabs enters his dark house where all the lights are off. Mr. Krabs questions what's happening. SpongeBob stammers that they're all done and everything looks great. Patrick agrees and says Mr. Krabs doesn't have to look around because they already did that for him. The lights turn on and they're grinning suspiciously. Mr. Krabs says they both look like they have a dirty little secret. He laughs and says he's kidding. He says to let him see how they did. He notes not bad boys, not bad, listing a nice even coat, high gloss, no bubbles. SpongeBob agrees it looks great and says they'll just be going. He and Patrick are about to leave. Mr. Krabs freaks out as his groceries fly out of his hands. He shouts about what they did. SpongeBob stops as he and Patrick kneel down and beg. SpongeBob says, "Oh, Mr. Krabs, they're so sorry," begging him not to debutt them. Patrick begs for mercy. Mr. Krabs says sorry questioningly and notes they dusted all his knickknacks, adding that was real nice. He points to something and freaks out again, asking what something is. SpongeBob begs that it's not their fault. Patrick begs they didn't do it on purpose. Both keep saying accident repeatedly while begging. Patrick begs he doesn't want to be buttless. Mr. Krabs says, "Oh," and supposes the floor molding just painted itself on its own. He notes the wall is decorated with tiny ships and calls that craftsmanship. He notices something and freaks out again. He runs over to a bunch of dolls lined up perfectly, except one, finishing his sentence about his doll, Arama. Patrick and SpongeBob are confused. He explains all the dolls in this doll Arama were perfectly aligned. He straightens one of the dolls to an upright position. The doll says Mama. Mr. Krabs says the boys thought he wouldn't notice. He guesses no harm done and tells them they're free to go. He runs into a long pile of paintings and says, "Ow." He says that's funny because he doesn't remember a stack of paintings sticking from the wall where his first dollar used to be. He sees a painting of a crying clown and notes he doesn't remember this painting at all. He takes it off the stack, revealing a painting of an auto race. He says, "Or this one." He takes it off, revealing an abstract painting. He says, "Or this one." SpongeBob and Patrick are anxious. He keeps saying "or this one" repeatedly as he takes paintings off. He takes a painting of a banana off and says, "or this one." He takes a painting of a pirate character off and SpongeBob is behind it. SpongeBob nervously greets Mr. Krabs. Mr. Krabs asks what SpongeBob is doing. SpongeBob says, "Oh, you know, just hanging around." Patrick gives a thumbs down and says boo. Mr. Krabs tells him to get down onto the floor. SpongeBob stretches his body to the floor. Mr. Krabs is now annoyed and says now SpongeBob is just being silly. Mr. Krabs takes him off the wall and shoves him aside. SpongeBob says no repeatedly, telling Mr. Krabs not to look and claiming it's a trick. Mr. Krabs asks angrily if they got paint all over his first dollar. SpongeBob says they're sorry. Patrick says they're so sorry. Mr. Krabs looks at the dollar again, then looks at SpongeBob and Patrick. He asks, "And then did they draw on it with crayon?" The dollar has a smiley face and $2 signs drawn on with green crayon. Patrick is holding a green crayon as SpongeBob emotionlessly looks at him. Patrick says he thought maybe Mr. Krabs would buy it. Mr. Krabs says, "All right, boys," and asks if they know what he has to do now. SpongeBob asks if he means their butts. Patrick asks if he can use his one last time. Mr. Krabs takes the dollar and licks it. The paint comes off, then Mr. Krabs puts the dollar back up on the wall. Mr. Krabs says, "There we go, good as new." SpongeBob and Patrick are dumbfounded and stammer. Mr. Krabs says, "Yeah, he lied," explaining this paint actually comes off with saliva. He laughs. SpongeBob frowns, then smiles and says, "Oh, he gets it." He explains Mr. Krabs told them the paint was permanent, so him and Patrick would be more careful and not get paint on anything. Mr. Krabs says, "Nah, he just likes to mess with them." He laughs. SpongeBob scowls. He and Patrick glare at Mr. Krabs and storm out in disgust. Mr. Krabs laughs so hard he spits all over the walls. He says the old man still has it. He continues laughing, but the paint comes off the wall from all the spit. He finally stops laughing to see his whole place a mess. He says, "Aw, crud," and notes he really has to learn to say it, not spray it. Wet Painters earned its reputation as one of the greatest SpongeBob episodes because it built tension through a perfectly calibrated structure where each attempt to fix the problem made things worse. The episode understood that comedy often comes from watching characters dig themselves deeper into trouble despite their best efforts. SpongeBob and Patrick started with a single dot of paint on the dollar, and through their panic and attempted solutions ended up with the entire dollar covered in paint plus crayon drawings. Each failed cleaning attempt escalated the damage while simultaneously escalating the physical comedy. Patrick losing his hands to the sanding, getting a hole blasted through his body from the fire hose, and taking the beating meant for the dollar created visual gags that built upon each other. The paranoia element made the episode work on a psychological level beyond simple slapstick. SpongeBob's 3-hour delay before making the first brushstroke established the crippling fear of making a mistake with permanent paint. The time cards breaking the fourth wall with Patrick running out of cards added meta humor that acknowledged how ridiculous SpongeBob's hesitation had become. When SpongeBob finally painted, his elaborate attempts to control the single line of paint showed how fear transformed a simple task into an impossible challenge. The paint bubble creation demonstrated how trying too hard to avoid mistakes often causes the exact problems you're trying to prevent. Patrick's character provided the perfect counterbalance to SpongeBob's anxiety. His suggestion that they're not getting paid to move stuff established his logic as technically correct but practically useless. His claim about not being cavemen, followed by smashing a computer on the dollar, captured his unique approach to problem solving. His rant about Mr. Krabs' dollar accidentally providing the solution showed how Patrick's randomness sometimes produced helpful results despite his lack of intelligence. His decision to use the replacement dollar in a vending machine for chocolate demonstrated his inability to understand priorities, even when the solution was in his hands. The stacking paintings gag built suspense through repetition and misdirection. Each painting Mr. Krabs removed increased the tension while also providing comedy through the absurdity of how many paintings SpongeBob and Patrick used to hide the dollar. The reveal of SpongeBob literally hanging on the wall behind all the paintings paid off the increasingly desperate nature of their cover-up attempts. Mr. Krabs taking them down one by one while commenting on not remembering them created a rhythm that made the inevitable discovery feel both surprising and earned. Mr. Krabs' character drove the episode's tension through his initial threat and subsequent discovery process. His warning about cutting off their rear ends and mounting them over his fireplace with personalized plaques established genuine stakes that the episode never let viewers forget. The recurring visual of their butts on the wall reminded audiences what failure meant. His methodical discovery of all their small mistakes before finding the big one showed his attention to detail, while building anxiety about the dollar reveal. His freakouts over the dusted knickknacks and misaligned doll created false alarms that made the actual disaster seem worse by comparison. The twist ending elevated Wet Painters from great episode to classic because it recontextualized everything that came before. Mr. Krabs licking the paint off the dollar revealed that all of SpongeBob and Patrick's panic was unnecessary. The lie about permanent paint was just Mr. Krabs messing with them rather than trying to make them more careful. This twist worked because it felt both surprising and inevitable. Mr. Krabs' cheapness and enjoyment of tormenting his employees was established character behavior. The episode never showed anyone actually testing if saliva removed the paint, so viewers had no reason to doubt the permanent claim. SpongeBob's attempt to explain the lie as a teaching method got immediately shut down by Mr. Krabs, admitting he just likes to mess with them, which felt true to his character. The final joke, where Mr. Krabs laughs so hard he spits all over the walls and removes all the paint, provided perfect poetic justice. After putting SpongeBob and Patrick through psychological torture for his own amusement, Mr. Krabs ended up creating the exact problem he threatened them about. His realization that he needs to learn to say it, not spray it, acknowledged his own role in the disaster while maintaining the comedy through his casual attitude about the mess he created. This ending gave viewers satisfaction, without requiring SpongeBob and Patrick to get revenge, which would have changed the tone of the episode. The episode succeeded by taking a mundane task and finding every possible way to generate anxiety, comedy, and escalation from it. The permanent paint established clear stakes. The memorabilia-filled walls created obstacles. The first dollar provided a specific target for disaster. SpongeBob's paranoia and Patrick's stupidity created the disaster. Their panic made it worse. Their attempted solutions made it worse still. Their cover-up attempts grew increasingly desperate. The twist revealed it was all unnecessary. The final joke punished the person who created the unnecessary panic. Every element served the story while providing comedy that built throughout the episode's runtime, earning Wet Painters its place among the greatest SpongeBob episodes ever made. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to the camping episode, Season 3, Episode 17B. The camping episode aired on the 3rd of April 2004 as the second half of the 57th episode of SpongeBob SquarePants Season 3. The episode earned 5.4 million viewers and became one of the most beloved episodes in the entire series. When fans discuss the greatest SpongeBob episodes, the camping episode consistently appears in those conversations because of its perfect escalation, absurdist humor, and one of the most satisfying payoffs in the show's history. The episode takes the simple premise of camping in the backyard and transforms it into a masterclass in building toward a punchline that justifies every seemingly random detail that came before it. The episode opens at nightfall at Squidward's house with Squidward preparing for bedtime. He enters his bedroom in his nightgown, carrying a book and cup of tea. He sighs and announces, "Finally, the weekend is here." He gestures to a dance quarterly calendar on his wall and explains, "This isn't just any old weekend. This is the weekend SpongeBob and Patrick go camping." He wonders if it would be great if they got lost in the woods and never came back. A thought bubble appears, showing SpongeBob hiking with Patrick, both with camping gear strapped to their backs. An owl hoots. SpongeBob and Patrick look worried. SpongeBob says Patrick's name and announces he's scared in Squidward's imagination. The thought bubble disappears. Squidward says, "That would be great," and jumps into bed. He tells himself he's waited a long time for this, listing a soft bed, warm tea, a good book, and 2 whole days with no one bothering him. He laughs and imitates SpongeBob's face. Squidward hears SpongeBob's real laugh outside. He questions what's happening and goes outside to find SpongeBob and Patrick in a tent complete with sleeping bags and reading books. The two are laughing. Squidward asks if they aren't supposed to be camping. SpongeBob confirms they are camping. Squidward points out it's not camping if they're 10 feet from their house. The camera zooms out to show the tent's location right outside their homes. SpongeBob says it doesn't matter where you are as long as you're outdoors. He explains, while all those soft city folk are safe in their beds, reading books, they're out here pitting themselves against the formidable forces of nature. He asks if Squidward wants to join them. Squidward says no. SpongeBob says okay and tells him to have fun inside. Squidward leaves. SpongeBob and Patrick pull their book back out along with a flashlight and begin to read and giggle. Squidward pops back into the tent glaring and asks what SpongeBob means by have fun inside. SpongeBob says just have fun inside and tells him they'll see him tomorrow. Squidward says oh and bye. Squidward exits. SpongeBob and Patrick resume reading. Squidward enters the tent again and gasps. He calls SpongeBob a little sneak and announces he sees what SpongeBob is doing. SpongeBob asks what. Squidward says not to think he can't see what SpongeBob is doing. SpongeBob asks what again. Squidward accuses SpongeBob of saying he can't take it. SpongeBob starts to say, but all he... Squidward holds up a tentacle and interrupts. He accuses SpongeBob of saying he's soft and thinking the little have fun inside challenge is going to make him come camping with them, but that is never going to happen. He declares there's no way he's going to sit out here all night with 2 losers and tells them to get used to it. He exits the tent. SpongeBob says okay and tells him to have fun inside. Squidward pokes his head back into the tent, blowing SpongeBob and Patrick back with his loud voice. He announces that's it and he's in, declaring he'll show them camping. He runs into his house. SpongeBob tells Patrick that Squidward is going to come camping with them. Both climb out of the tent and giggle. Squidward emerges with a large camping backpack. He says now they'll see how a real outdoorsman does it. He falls face forward on the ground, squished by the immense backpack. He climbs out from underneath and pulls a pouch from the backpack. He announces his remote-controlled self-assembling tent and tells them to watch and learn. SpongeBob takes out binoculars, while Patrick grabs a notepad and a pair of half-moon glasses. Squidward tosses the pouch into the air and presses the remote, but the power fizzles and the tent appears unassembled in a pile on the ground. SpongeBob says that was great and asks how Squidward gets inside. Patrick agrees and says it's all crushy looking. Squidward says it isn't put up yet and calls them idiots. He grumbles while picking up the tent and fiddling around with it. He accidentally rips it. SpongeBob says customization while still acting like he and Patrick are taking notes. Patrick says genius. Squidward beats on the tent with a wooden stick repeatedly. SpongeBob announces, Squidward is tenderizing the ground. Patrick says, of course. Squidward is still struggling with the tent. SpongeBob tells Patrick to write that down repeatedly. Patrick appears to be taking notes, but there is just a tic-tac-toe game in progress on his notepad. Squidward gives the pile a huge kick, and it automatically becomes an assembled tent. He announces, voila. The perfect tent collapses to pile form again. Squidward pushes it out of the way and says what could compare to just lying out under the stars. He takes a lone blanket and places it on the ground. SpongeBob and Patrick applaud and cheer wildly and vigorously. Squidward says he's worked up an appetite as big as all outdoors and announces time for a little grub. He supposes the two are going to stew up some twigs and rocks. SpongeBob laughs and says nope, explaining they have something even better, marshmallows. He pulls out a Marsh King bag and pops a marshmallow into his mouth, saying it's just like the astronauts eat. Patrick has a round fishbowl over his head like an astronaut helmet. He imitates static noise and says Patrick to SpongeBob repeatedly, asking if SpongeBob reads him and saying over. SpongeBob also has a helmet and imitates static noise, saying SpongeBob to Patrick and confirming he reads him, adding over. Patrick says he likes going with static noises and over. SpongeBob says, me too with static. Patrick and SpongeBob start to repeatedly exchange static noises while Squidward looks annoyed. SpongeBob tells Patrick to help himself and holds out the Marsh King bag. Patrick says yummy and takes a marshmallow, cramming it into his mouth and smashing his helmet. He announces the deliciousness has landed. Squidward says, well, those two astronauts can eat marshmallows, but he's going to have a can of Swedish barnacle balls. He holds up a can showing its full label and adds just as soon as he can get his can opener. SpongeBob asks if Squidward didn't take a can opener when he hiked out here. Squidward asks why he would bother when they're 10 feet from his house. SpongeBob says, but this is the wilderness and it doesn't seem to fit the camping spirit. Patrick calls it pretty weenie. Squidward says all right and tells them to give him a marshmallow. Squidward begins toasting his marshmallow lightly. Patrick, sitting across from him, sets his on fire and tries to blow on it to cool it down, but the marshmallow flies off and hits Squidward in the face. Patrick gets another marshmallow and repeats the same thing twice. After 2 marshmallows to the face, Squidward ducks and laughs at his dodging, but the third marshmallow has a boomerang effect and hits Squidward in the back of the head. Squidward asks, besides spitting molten foodstuffs at him, what else do they do for fun? SpongeBob explains that after a long day of camping, it's nice to unwind with a nice, relaxing campfire song. He calls it the Campfire Song and begins singing with Patrick joining in. The song involves spelling out campfire song and singing increasingly fast. SpongeBob calls on Patrick and then Squidward during the song. When Squidward stays silent, SpongeBob says good and continues. At the end, SpongeBob smashes his ukulele like a guitar at the end of a rock show. Patrick does the same with his drum set. SpongeBob asks if that wasn't relaxing. Squidward says no and announces this is relaxing. He holds up his clarinet and begins playing terribly. SpongeBob and Patrick look alarmed. SpongeBob says, oh no, and picks up a marshmallow, holding it into a slingshot. He announces he'll save Squidward. SpongeBob slingshots the marshmallow at Squidward. It goes up his clarinet and sticks in the back of his throat. SpongeBob comes over to assist him and asks if Squidward is alright. He tells him to chew and swallow and asks if he's better. Squidward asks better questioningly and says he was just fine until SpongeBob launched that ballistic junk food into his windpipe. SpongeBob says but he had to because it's too dangerous to play the clarinet badly out here in the wilderness. He whispers it might attract a sea bear. Squidward asks in a low, cautious tone about a sea bear, questioning if SpongeBob means like the ones that don't exist. He says the last part in an angry tone. SpongeBob asks what Squidward is saying. Squidward declares there's no such thing and they're just a myth. SpongeBob says oh no and insists sea bears are all too real. He announces it says so in the Bikini Bottom Inquirer and holds up a cheesy tabloid newspaper. Squidward reads the cover story titled, I Married a Sea Bear. Patrick agrees and holds up Fake Science Monthly newspaper. Squidward reads the headline, Sea Bears and Fairy Tales Are Real, calling it the stupidest thing he's ever heard. Patrick says, well, maybe it is stupid, but it's also dumb. SpongeBob says Patrick's right and declares sea bears are no laughing matter. He explains why, once he met this guy who knew this guy who knew this guy, continuing this chain for an extremely long time before finally saying who knew this guy's cousin. Squidward interrupts, saying SpongeBob is right and he should be more careful. He suggests SpongeBob tell him all of the things he shouldn't do if he wants to keep the sea bears away. SpongeBob says okay, and that's easy. First off, don't play the clarinet. Squidward asks, then what? SpongeBob says never wave your flashlight back and forth really fast. Patrick adds that flashlights are their natural prey. Squidward says he's kidding. SpongeBob says don't stomp around because they take that as a challenge. Patrick agrees. Squidward writes on a notepad and tells them to go on. SpongeBob says don't ever eat cheese. Squidward asks sliced or cubed. SpongeBob whispers with Patrick and says cubed, adding sliced is fine. Squidward says yeah and asks what else. SpongeBob says never wear a sombrero. Patrick adds in a goofy fashion. SpongeBob says or clown shoes. Patrick says or a hoop skirt. SpongeBob says and never. Patrick says ever. SpongeBob says ever. Patrick says duh. Both announce together to screech like a chimpanzee. Squidward says wow and comments on how amazing it is that many things can set a sea bear off. Both huddle together shuddering and say they're horrible. Squidward says and suddenly he has the sense they're all in danger. Both ask why. Squidward says he doesn't know and runs off, returning with a flashlight, clown shoes, hoop skirt, sombrero, and tray full of cubed cheese. A diabolical look is on his face. He says, "Just a feeling." SpongeBob says no, horrified. Squidward says yes. SpongeBob says no again. Squidward begins making chimp noises. Both beg Squidward please not to do it. Squidward continues hooting, stomping, and waving the flashlight around while making various chimp sounds. Patrick asks SpongeBob what they're going to do because a sea bear is sure to come and eat them. SpongeBob tells him not to worry because he'll draw them an anti-sea bear circle in the dirt. He takes a stick and draws a circle around himself and Patrick. Squidward continues to screech like a chimpanzee. Patrick says good thinking and holds up another issue of Fake Science Monthly. He adds that all the experts say it's the only defense against a sea bear attack. Squidward ends his screeching and starts laughing. He calls them so gullible and points out he did everything that attracts a sea bear and nothing happened. He asks if sea bears really exist, why didn't one show up? SpongeBob suggests maybe it's because Squidward isn't wearing his sombrero in a goofy fashion. Squidward says oh sorry and asks how silly of him, questioning if SpongeBob means like this. Squidward tilts his sombrero to the right while laughing, but something off-screen takes the hat and turns it upside down instead. The camera zooms out to show an angry sea bear that inverted Squidward's sombrero. It looks like a giant fish with the head of a bear and claws on its fins. SpongeBob says no, like that. Squidward sees the growling sea bear and screams when it roars and chases him while he runs. It begins to maul Squidward off-screen while SpongeBob and Patrick are still huddled inside their anti-sea bear circle. SpongeBob asks if Squidward is okay. Squidward looks bruised and battered and says no. SpongeBob tells him quick to jump inside their anti-sea bear circle before the bear comes back. Patrick brings the anti-sea bear circle and drops it at his and SpongeBob's current position. He adds that sea bears often attack more than once. Squidward asks if they're crazy and says a dirt circle won't stop that monster. He announces he's running for his life. Both say no. The sea bear rushes back and attacks Squidward again. SpongeBob tells him not to run because sea bears hate that. Squidward thanks him for the tip and says he guesses he'll just limp home then. Both say no. The sea bear returns a third time, attacking Squidward. SpongeBob says they hate limping more than running. Squidward starts to say, well, he guesses he'll just have to do something. The sea bear attacks Squidward for the fourth time. SpongeBob says he should have warned him about crawling. The sea bear attacks Squidward yet again. Squidward asks what he did that time. SpongeBob says he doesn't know and guesses the bear just doesn't like him. Patrick tells Squidward to pretend to be somebody else. SpongeBob tosses Squidward the stick and tells him to draw a circle. Squidward says, okay. The sea bear attacks Squidward anyway. SpongeBob explains that was an oval and it has to be a circle. Squidward runs and climbs on top of SpongeBob and Patrick, who are still sitting in the circle. He tells them to move over. The sea bear comes up to Squidward in the circle, then notices the circle itself below. It snarls and points a threatening claw at him before leaving. Squidward says, hey, it worked, and tells them they saved his life. SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward all cheer together. SpongeBob says yeah, and adds he's glad it was just a sea bear because this circle would never hold back a sea rhinoceros. Squidward asks what attracts them. Patrick says the sound of a sea bear attack. A sea rhinoceros appears, snorting. SpongeBob says good thing they're all wearing their anti-sea rhinoceros undergarments, and asks, right, Squidward? Squidward asks, huh, questioningly as the episode ends. The camping episode earned its reputation as one of the greatest SpongeBob episodes because it executed the perfect long-form setup and payoff structure. Every seemingly absurd detail about sea bear behavior that SpongeBob listed in the middle of the episode became directly relevant when Squidward deliberately did all of those things. The episode trained viewers to expect the warnings about sea bears to be nonsense, making Squidward's skepticism feel justified. His mocking of the warnings and deliberate provocation of the non-existent creature felt like the reasonable response. When the sea bear actually appeared, it validated everything SpongeBob said, while simultaneously making Squidward look foolish for his arrogance. The genius of the episode came from establishing rules and then following them consistently. SpongeBob listed specific actions that attract sea bears, including playing clarinet badly, waving flashlights, stomping, eating cubed cheese, wearing a sombrero in a goofy fashion, wearing clown shoes or hoop skirts, and screeching like a chimpanzee. When Squidward gathered all these items and performed all these actions, the episode honored its own internal logic by having the sea bear appear. The detail about the sombrero needing to be worn in a goofy fashion specifically allowed for the perfect visual gag where something off-screen adjusted Squidward's hat from merely tilted to fully upside down. The anti-sea bear circle represented the episode's commitment to its absurd premise. SpongeBob and Patrick treated the circle as absolute protection, backed by Fake Science Monthly and other dubious sources. When the circle actually worked, It justified all the buildup while creating a new problem for Squidward, who refused to believe in it. His attempts to escape the sea bear by running, limping, and crawling all resulted in additional attacks because SpongeBob warned against those specific actions. The oval versus circle distinction provided comedy through precision, showing that even in this absurd scenario, details mattered. Squidward's character drove the episode's conflict through his initial desire for peace and quiet, transforming into determination to prove his camping superiority. His thought bubble about SpongeBob and Patrick getting lost in the woods established his hope for their failure. His offense at being called soft, despite nobody actually calling him soft, showed his insecurity. His massive camping backpack that crushed him and remote-controlled tent that failed demonstrated his approach of using expensive equipment rather than genuine outdoor skills. His blanket on the ground after the tent failure revealed his actual camping philosophy matched SpongeBob and Patrick's simplicity despite his protests. The escalation from peaceful camping to sea bear attack followed logical steps that built comedy through each transition. SpongeBob and Patrick started by reading in their tent 10 feet from home. Squidward joined to prove his superiority. The marshmallow roasting led to Patrick's projectile marshmallows hitting Squidward. The campfire song demonstrated their different approaches to entertainment. Squidward's terrible clarinet playing prompted SpongeBob's warning about sea bears. The warnings turned into a list of forbidden behaviors. Squidward's skepticism led to deliberate provocation. The provocation summoned an actual sea bear. Each step followed naturally from the previous one, while building toward the episode's climax. The final joke about the sea rhinoceros provided the perfect ending by introducing an even greater threat that Squidward couldn't prepare for. After surviving the sea bear through the anti-sea bear circle, Squidward finally accepted SpongeBob and Patrick's knowledge. The reveal that sea rhinoceroses are attracted by the sound of sea bear attacks meant Squidward's multiple maulings guaranteed another threat. SpongeBob's casual mention of anti-sea rhinoceros undergarments followed the episode's pattern of specific protections against specific threats. Squidward's confusion about what that meant as the sea rhinoceros appeared created the perfect cliffhanger ending that implied another round of attacks was coming. The episode succeeded by committing completely to its premise without breaking character or acknowledging the absurdity. SpongeBob and Patrick treated sea bear protection as serious survival knowledge backed by publications like the Bikini Bottom Inquirer and Fake Science Monthly. Their sincere belief in these obviously fake sources made their warnings funnier, while also making their ultimate vindication more satisfying. Squidward's reasonable skepticism made him the audience surrogate who represented how any logical person would respond to claims about sea bears. His punishment for skepticism worked as comedy because the episode established clear rules and showed him deliberately breaking every single one. The camping episode earned its place among the greatest SpongeBob episodes by building an elaborate framework of rules and references that seemed like random nonsense before revealing that every detail mattered. The episode proved that great comedy comes from setup and payoff executed with precision and commitment to internal logic, no matter how absurd that logic might be. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Rock Bottom, Season 1, Episode 17B. Rock Bottom aired on the 15th of March 2000 as the second half of the 17th episode of SpongeBob SquarePants Season 1. The episode earned 3.08 million viewers and became one of the most memorable episodes in the entire series. When fans discuss the greatest SpongeBob episodes, Rock Bottom consistently appears in those conversations because of its unique atmosphere, escalating frustration comedy, and genuinely unsettling tone that set it apart from typical SpongeBob adventures. The episode takes the simple premise of missing a bus stop and transforms it into an anxiety-filled nightmare that captures the feeling of being completely lost in an unfamiliar place. The episode opens at Glove World, where SpongeBob and Patrick are standing outside the amusement park waiting for the bus. Patrick is licking a glove-shaped lollipop. SpongeBob announces another fantastic day at Glove World. The bus stops at the bus stop and they get in. SpongeBob struggles with his balloon. The bus driver clears his throat and points to a coin deposit. SpongeBob says let him get his wallet. He turns around, but the balloon he's holding hits the bus driver. He says wait and to let him check this pocket. He turns around and the balloon hits the bus driver again. He says no and turns around, with the balloon hitting the driver for the third time. He asks Patrick if he has any change. Patrick asks from off-screen how much SpongeBob needs. SpongeBob asks how much it is. The bus driver says 50 cents. SpongeBob turns around and the balloon smacks the driver in the back of his head. SpongeBob says 50 cents. Patrick says, nope. SpongeBob turns around and the balloon smacks the bus driver again. He starts to say, let him check his other pocket. The bus driver says annoyed to forget it. SpongeBob turns around and the balloon smacks the driver again. He asks what the driver said. The bus driver yells to just take his seat. SpongeBob thanks him. The bus driver starts to say, yeah, whatever, but SpongeBob turns around and the balloon smacks him in the back of the head, causing him to glare at SpongeBob with an annoyed grin. SpongeBob walks past a sleeping passenger and takes his seat next to Patrick. The bus drives away. Patrick asks SpongeBob to show him what he got at Glove World. SpongeBob says, okay, and shows his glove light, turning it on. Patrick says, wow. SpongeBob puts the light inside his head and his eyes start to flash. He says he sees Patrick. Both laugh. Patrick says he got gloves for his glove action figure and puts a tiny glove on the big glove's thumb. SpongeBob says, cool. Patrick looks out the window and notices a yellow sign that says, you are now leaving Bikini Bottom, written in red as they drive past it. Patrick says, hey SpongeBob. The camera zooms at SpongeBob's face with a tiny glove on his nose. He says, yeah, Patrick. Patrick asks where leaving Bikini Bottom is. SpongeBob asks where Patrick saw that. Patrick explains they just passed the sign saying you are now in leaving Bikini Bottom. SpongeBob gasps loudly and asks, what? Looking out the window. Patrick asks, what's wrong as they drive past a green sign with Bikini Bottom city limits written on it. SpongeBob says he thinks they're on the wrong something. The bus drives down at a 90-degree angle steep road as SpongeBob and Patrick yell. The alarm sounds and the two fly back, hit the back of the bus, and end up looking flattened. SpongeBob tries to finish by saying bus. He walks slowly up front, helping himself by holding the seats. His face gets distorted as he moves closer due to strong pressure. His pants rip off and fly at Patrick, but Patrick ducks in time and giggles. Then SpongeBob's underwear hits Patrick right in the face. The bus comes to an immediate stop at the end of the steep road next to a strange-looking bus stop. SpongeBob and Patrick both fly forward and hit the windshield. Then the balloon smacks the bus driver onto it and all of them peel off together. SpongeBob and Patrick are kicked out of the bus. SpongeBob says, but sir, they need to get back to Bikini Bottom. The bus driver says off-screen, oh well, and hands the balloon to SpongeBob. He drives the bus away. Patrick asks what this is. SpongeBob reads a sign saying rock bottom. The camera scrolls over to a bus station. SpongeBob notes it sure is weird around here. Kind of different. Even the soil looks different. He picks up some green soil. The soil asks if SpongeBob would mind putting him down, making a raspberry sound between words. SpongeBob shakes him rapidly off as he gasps. Patrick says he doesn't like it here because it's dark and scary. He says quivering that he doesn't want to be here and wants to go home. He adds he can't even tell the bathrooms apart. The bathroom doors have a question mark on one door and an upside-down question mark on the other. SpongeBob says that's an easy one and explains they just wait for somebody to come out and then Patrick will know. A character comes out the upside-down question mark door. Patrick gasps. SpongeBob suggests maybe they should wait for one more. One character comes out of the question mark door while three characters come out the upside-down question mark door. Patrick has bloodshot eyes and starts to sweat. He says he still can't read the sign while shaking in fear, adding he wants to go home. SpongeBob says okay and tells Patrick to wait for the bus and call him when it comes because he's going to get a bus schedule. He walks off saying, boy, this place sure is creepy. He sees the bus driving by with Patrick's head sticking out the window. Patrick says, hey SpongeBob, the bus is here. SpongeBob runs after the bus and pants due to exhaustion. Patrick yells and half sobs in worry, calling SpongeBob's name. The bus drives up the 90-degree angle road and SpongeBob tries to run up the road but falls down. He tries a couple more times but is unsuccessful. SpongeBob says he guesses Grandpa SquarePants was right about not running for a bus. He puts on Grandpa SquarePants' disguise and adds especially one that's going up at a 90-degree angle. He takes off his disguise and says he better go wait for the next one. After a bubble transition, SpongeBob stands by the bus stop sign with his glove balloon in his right hand. He says, come on bus, because he has to get home and feed Gary. He notices his shoe is untied and lets go of the balloon. He says, uh-oh, and his shoe is untied. He puts his foot on the bus sign and says over, under, and loop, D, loop, and over. The bus drives up and then drives off. He finishes saying and through the barrel. He groans as he missed the bus. After another bubble transition to later, the wind is blowing SpongeBob's glove hat on his side, so he puts it back, but it blows the glove balloon away. SpongeBob says my balloon and chases after it, jumping for it when he gets the chance. A bus drives up and then drives off. SpongeBob says, wait, hold on, and stop that bus. He says not again and throws his hat down. He notices someone named Bert and asks, excuse me, sir, can you help me? Bert makes a raspberry sound. SpongeBob says, yeah. Bert runs after the balloon. SpongeBob says no, not the balloon, explaining he needs to know when the next bus comes. The bus drives up and then drives off. SpongeBob runs after it but decides to walk back to the bus stop sign. He says, well, there goes another one, and he has to be more diligent. He announces he is not leaving this spot no matter what. His stomach growls. He says he's getting hungry and notices his glove candy dispenser. He says good thing he went to Glove World. He squeezes out 6 tiny glove candies onto his tongue, then spits them out saying, ew, glove flavored. He asks, what's that? A candy vending machine is shown across the road. SpongeBob rubs his tummy and says kelp nougat crunch. He checks each side of the road to see if a bus is coming. He announces he's not leaving this spot no matter what. His stomach growls again. He says he'll only be gone a second and runs over to the machine. While getting out a quarter, a bus drives up. He runs back across to the bus saying, hey. The bus drives off. He says, ooh. His stomach growls a third time. SpongeBob takes a few steps across the road and turns around to check for the bus. He takes a few more steps and checks again. He gets to the candy machine and takes out the quarter. Before inserting it, he checks for a bus. There's no bus, so he puts in the quarter, but a bus does come and drives off. He says, wait. Now he checks to his left down the road and decides to sprint across and get some candy. He pushes some buttons and checks for the bus. The candy is slowly coming down. He says, come on repeatedly. The candy drops to the bottom. SpongeBob grabs for it, but a bus drives up and then drives off. SpongeBob gets angry. He reaches for the candy, but a bus comes up. Every time he reaches for the candy, the bus drives forward, but when he pulls his arm away, the bus drives backwards. He decides to leave the candy and run after the bus, but the bus drives off before he can get there. A character comes up and takes the candy. SpongeBob says, hey, that was mine. He walks over to the candy machine. 3 more buses drive up and drive off while he's over there, so he decides to run back. No more buses come, so he shakes the bus sign angrily and says, barnacles. He announces, alright, that's it, and no more Mr. Nice Guy. After a bubble transition, SpongeBob is at the candy machine staring at it, and a bus drives up. Another SpongeBob tiptoes up, but the SpongeBob at the candy machine falls over, revealing it to be made of cardboard. The bus drives off. SpongeBob says tartar sauce. After another bubble transition, SpongeBob appears as a bus stop bench. A bus drives up but drives off after it notices the SpongeBob bench. SpongeBob morphs back to his original shape and says fish paste. After another bubble transition, SpongeBob walks into the bus station. He announces he's getting to the bottom of this right now and wants a bus to Bikini Bottom. He declares he is first in line and no one is going to tell him otherwise. He sees someone standing behind him already in line. He says, okay, second, announcing he is second in line. He sees another person already in line. He says, okay, third is good. Another person is already in line. He says fourth, not bad. After a bubble transition, SpongeBob is at the end of the line behind another character. He announces, okay, 329, declaring he is 329th in line, and nobody forget it. The character inflates herself like a balloon and spits out a giant egg on SpongeBob's head with the number 329 on it and makes a raspberry sound. The window attendant says next with a raspberry. SpongeBob says, well, at least the line is moving. Everyone steps forward. The 329 egg hatches 3 baby fish that jump in front of SpongeBob, making him remain 329th in line. SpongeBob gets extremely furious and lets out an angry growl. He says tartar sauce repeatedly. SpongeBob hides inside his clothes and goes ballistic. Then he comes out and everyone staring at him turns around. The window attendant says next repeatedly with raspberries as time goes fast. SpongeBob is sleeping. The attendant says next louder. SpongeBob wakes up saying, huh. The attendant says next with a raspberry. SpongeBob says finally and announces yes, he's next. He runs up to the window asking when is the next bus to Bikini Bottom. The attendant asks, what with a raspberry? SpongeBob says the bus schedule. The next bus. The attendant reveals himself and says he can't understand SpongeBob's accent, making raspberries between words. SpongeBob says the next bus to Bikini Bottom, making raspberries between words, including a long raspberry at the end. The attendant says, oh, with a raspberry, and asks why didn't SpongeBob say so with a raspberry? He announces next bus leaves in 5 seconds with a raspberry. The bus leaves. He says tough luck kid with a raspberry and adds that's the last one until morning with a raspberry. SpongeBob says, oh no you don't, making raspberries between words. The attendant says good night with a raspberry and puts a closed sign up. SpongeBob says hold it, he's not through here with a raspberry. He asks, do you hear me with a raspberry? He demands the attendant come back and give him a bus to Bikini Bottom right now. He announces until then he is not leaving this spot. He gives 3 raspberries. The lights turn off. SpongeBob laughs nervously and says, okay, like he said he'll be right here when they get back. At this spot, in the dark, by himself, with no one around, except his glove light. He turns on the light and says, ah, that's better. The glove light buzzes with a spark fuse and stops working. After a short pause, SpongeBob announces this isn't average everyday darkness, this is advanced darkness. He says hey and adds if he closes his eyes it doesn't seem so dark. A raspberry is heard in the distance. He opens his eyes and asks who's there. He walks down the road and says, well, he guesses that Spot will be there tomorrow and he better just keep walking. He hears another raspberry and says, running, better start running. He repeats running. He hears another raspberry and says, sprinting, adding yes, he just has to keep sprinting. He runs into the 90-degree angle road. He sits down with scallops flying around his head and says, sitting, bleeding. He hears noise and asks, who's there? He hears another raspberry and says, okay, that's enough. He hears another raspberry and says, don't come closer. He hears another raspberry and announces he's warning them. He hears another raspberry and declares he's a sponge. A red light shines around SpongeBob. It's Bert from earlier. SpongeBob says, oh, it's only him. Bert ties the white balloon to SpongeBob's wrist. SpongeBob says, well, that solves his balloon problem, but he has a bigger problem. Bert begins blowing the balloon bigger. SpongeBob explains he's kind of stuck here and needs to catch a bus to get home. He asks if Bert understands a word he's saying. He says, balloon has enough air, thanks, making raspberries between words. He gives a few more raspberries as he's floating up. He says, hey, he gets it, balloon travel, and says, thank you, making raspberries between words. Bert says, you're welcome. SpongeBob continues to float while leaving rock bottom. After a bubble transition to Bikini Bottom, SpongeBob passes by an entering rock bottom sign on the way up, still with the balloon tied to his wrist. He floats past downtown Bikini Bottom on the way to his home. SpongeBob says, ah, home at last. The balloon pops. Patrick is riding another bus to rock bottom and says, don't worry, SpongeBob, he's coming back for him. The bus passes by Patrick's, Squidward's, and SpongeBob's houses as the episode ends. Rock Bottom earned its reputation as one of the greatest SpongeBob episodes because it created genuine anxiety and discomfort while maintaining its comedic elements. The episode understood that being lost in an unfamiliar place represents a universal fear that viewers of all ages could relate to. SpongeBob's escalating frustration with missing bus after bus captured the feeling of everything going wrong when you're already in a bad situation. Each missed bus built upon the previous one, creating a cycle of failure that felt both funny and genuinely distressing. The visual design of Rock Bottom set it apart from typical SpongeBob locations. The dark atmosphere, strange architecture, and bizarre inhabitants created an otherworldly environment that felt truly alien. The bathroom door gag with the question mark and upside down question mark demonstrated how even simple tasks become impossible in an unfamiliar place. The talking soil that asked SpongeBob to put him down established that everything in Rock Bottom operated by different rules. These details built a location that felt genuinely uncomfortable rather than just silly. The raspberry speech pattern of Rock Bottom inhabitants created communication barriers that added to SpongeBob's isolation. His attempts to adopt their speech pattern at the end showed his desperation to fit in and get help. The window attendant claiming he couldn't understand SpongeBob's accent despite both speaking the same language added frustration to an already difficult situation. This communication breakdown represented how being in an unfamiliar place makes even basic interactions feel impossible. The escalating missed bus sequence demonstrated perfect comedic timing and structure. SpongeBob missing the bus while tying his shoe established the pattern. Missing it because his balloon blew away added physical comedy. The candy machine sequence elevated this to absurd levels, with the bus appearing and disappearing based on whether SpongeBob reached for the candy or not. His increasingly desperate attempts, including the cardboard cutout and disguising himself as a bench, showed his complete breakdown of rational thinking. Each failure built upon the previous one, while introducing new variations that kept the sequence fresh. The line at the bus station represented another layer of frustration where even getting information became an ordeal. Starting as first in line, then discovering he was actually 329th, captured the feeling of constantly discovering new obstacles. The egg hatching into 3 babies that cut in front of him took this frustration to surreal levels. His ballistic reaction after announcing tartar sauce repeatedly showed someone pushed beyond their limits. The time-lapse of him sleeping in line while everyone else got served demonstrated how being in an unfamiliar place makes time feel distorted and endless. SpongeBob's promise not to leave his spot, no matter what, became the episode's recurring joke that highlighted his desperation. Each time he broke this promise for understandable reasons only to miss another bus reinforced his bad luck. His declaration of no more Mr. Nice Guy, followed by increasingly absurd attempts to trick the bus, showed his complete loss of judgment. These moments worked because they showed SpongeBob as genuinely stressed rather than just cheerfully oblivious. The darkness sequence after the bus station closed elevated the episode's tone to genuinely unsettling. SpongeBob's glove light failing left him in what he called advanced darkness, rather than average everyday darkness. His observation about closing his eyes making it less dark showed his attempt to cope with fear through denial. The mysterious raspberry sounds in the darkness created genuine tension that built toward what seemed like danger. This sequence pushed boundaries for how uncomfortable a SpongeBob episode could make viewers feel. Bert's rescue provided the perfect resolution by using elements established throughout the episode. The balloon that caused problems earlier became the solution to getting home. SpongeBob's attempt to communicate with Bert using raspberries called back to his earlier communication struggles. The simple solution of balloon travel after all the complex failed attempts felt both surprising and satisfying. This ending rewarded patient viewers who sat through SpongeBob's suffering. Patrick's final appearance revealed he never realized SpongeBob missed the bus until much later. His announcement that he's coming back for SpongeBob as SpongeBob floats past heading home created perfect ironic timing. This joke demonstrated how Patrick's obliviousness meant SpongeBob suffered alone through an ordeal that could have been prevented if Patrick had simply noticed sooner. The episode ending with them heading in opposite directions provided closure while maintaining the miscommunication theme. Rock Bottom earned its place among the greatest SpongeBob episodes by taking a relatable fear and building it into an anxiety-filled nightmare that balanced comedy with genuine discomfort. The episode proved that SpongeBob could explore darker tones while maintaining its humor and heart. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Idiot Box, Season 3, Episode 4B. Idiot Box aired on the 1st of March 2002 as the second half of the 44th episode of SpongeBob SquarePants Season 3. The episode earned 3.91 million viewers and became one of the most creative and beloved episodes in the entire series. When fans discuss the greatest SpongeBob episodes, Idiot Box consistently appears in those conversations because of its clever concept, perfect execution of the imagination theme, and one of the most satisfying endings where Squidward finally gets what he deserves. The episode takes the simple premise of playing in a cardboard box and transforms it into a commentary on imagination, cynicism, and the difference between believing in magic versus demanding logical explanations for everything. The episode opens with SpongeBob asking Patrick if he sees anything yet. Patrick says he needs his glasses and puts 2 glasses of water on his eyes like binoculars. His eyes are shown as live-action human eyes through the glasses. He looks around and announces it's the mail truck. SpongeBob and Patrick both shout about their package. Patrick throws the glasses and they both start dancing and hopping. Squidward comments he didn't realize it was Happy Hopping Moron Day. The mail carrier asks for SpongeBob SquarePants. SpongeBob confirms that's him. The mail carrier throws a big box next to him and Patrick. Squidward notes that's a big box. SpongeBob says thank you while still dancing and hopping. Patrick asks SpongeBob when they stop hopping. SpongeBob says 30 more seconds and rubs his hands together. Squidward guesses they probably ordered a lifetime supply of bubble soap and laughs as SpongeBob and Patrick lift up a big screen TV from the box smaller than the size of it. Squidward looks surprised and questions a brand new television. SpongeBob says easy repeatedly as he and Patrick throw the TV onto a trash can. SpongeBob and Patrick cheer and jump into the box, closing the flaps. Squidward says just when he thought they couldn't get any stupider. He walks up to the box and tells them to let him get this straight, asking if they ordered a giant screen television just so they could play in the box. SpongeBob emerges from the box and asks, "Pretty smart, huh?" Patrick emerges and says he thought it wouldn't work. Squidward says, "Yeah, that's quite a plan there," noting, "Oh, but wait, there's something else he wanted to ask them." He asks what it was and says, "Oh yeah." He yells in their faces, asking if they don't have any brains. SpongeBob explains they don't need television, not as long as they have their imagination. He makes a rainbow over his head with his hands when saying imagination. Squidward says, "Wow, he never thought of it that way," and calls it really something. He asks if he can have their TV. SpongeBob says with imagination he can be anything he wants. He says a pirate and curls his finger in a hook shape while saying R. He says a football player and stands in a football player stance saying hup. Patrick says a starfish. Squidward points out Patrick is already a starfish. Patrick tells Squidward, "See, it works," and suggests he try. Squidward rubs his 2 tentacles on both sides of his head and says, "Okay, let's see." He announces he's imagining himself watching TV and points to the one on the trash can, saying, "And there it is." He asks if he can have it. SpongeBob says, "Sure." Squidward says, "Oh boy," repeatedly and runs to the TV, pushing it to his house. SpongeBob says, "Okay, Squidward, but if he changes his mind, they'll be in this box." Patrick suggests they play mountain climbing adventure. SpongeBob says, "Let's go for it," and pulls the flaps of the box over them. He says gloves. Patrick says check. SpongeBob says hats. Patrick says check. SpongeBob says underwear. Patrick says check. SpongeBob tells Patrick to climb up there and secure this rope. Patrick says he's got it. Climbing noises come from the box. SpongeBob calls Patrick's name repeatedly and says he's going too high. Squidward says he hopes they put some air holes in that box and goes inside his house. SpongeBob tells Patrick to take it easy because he has to acclimate. Patrick says he'll take it easy when he's dead, adding he's shaking hands with Neptune and shouting Excelsior. Squidward opens his door, asking where that remote is. He walks up to the remote, which is right next to the box. He picks it up, puts it in his shirt, and stands next to the box listening to SpongeBob and Patrick. Patrick announces he is the Lizard King. SpongeBob calls Patrick's name repeatedly and says he thinks they should keep their voices down because they might start an avalanche. Patrick asks what. SpongeBob says loudly that he said they should keep their voices down in case of avalanches. Patrick asks what should they keep down. Squidward says morons. SpongeBob shouts their voices. Squidward asks if they will shut up and kicks the box, causing the sound of an avalanche. SpongeBob and Patrick scream and fall. They both start to cry. Squidward is shocked and says SpongeBob's name. He softly touches the box, causing another avalanche sound. Patrick says, "Hold me." SpongeBob says, "Hang in there, buddy, because the chopper is on the way." Patrick says his legs are frozen solid and SpongeBob will have to cut them off with a saw. Squidward begins to sweat. SpongeBob says, "No, Patrick, he can't do that." Patrick asks why not. SpongeBob says because he already cut off his own arms. Squidward kneels down. Patrick shouts no. Squidward quickly opens the box and looks in. SpongeBob and Patrick sit inside the box. Squidward asks, confused, how they're making that noise. SpongeBob laughs and asks what noise. Patrick says he could only hear the sound of their laughter. Squidward says yes, but those sound effects, the avalanche. Patrick tells him not to forget the second avalanche. Squidward says forget it, and notes he doesn't know why he's wasting his time out here when he could be watching his brand new television. Helicopter sounds are heard from the box. Squidward questions what's happening and looks around at the sky, ducking. A pilot voice from inside the box announces attention climbers, "Please hold on, the saws are on the way." SpongeBob and Patrick cheer. Squidward growls and says aha. He opens the box again and sees SpongeBob and Patrick sitting inside the box. He demands to know how they're doing that. SpongeBob starts explaining they first establish a base camp at 15,000 feet. Squidward interrupts asking about the noises and how they're making those noises. Patrick says, "Oh, that's easy," explaining all you need is a box, SpongeBob says in imagination, making another rainbow with his hands. Squidward asks as SpongeBob and Patrick duck down into the box if they're trying to say he has no imagination. He claims he has more imagination in one tentacle than they have in their whole bodies. He tries to make a rainbow with his hands like SpongeBob, but is unsuccessful. Patrick says that's good, and now all Squidward needs is a box. He closes the box. Squidward walks back to his house and says he'll show them. After a bubble transition, he looks in his closet saying there's gotta be one in here. He finds a small round green box and says this hat box should do nicely. He pulls out a Mexican sombrero and asks why he hasn't worn this yet. He throws it off screen and gets in the box, but he is too big for it and just sits there. He frowns with smoke present, looks at his watch, then gets mad and kicks the box. Police sirens are heard. A policeman voice inside SpongeBob and Patrick's box announces attention. They have them surrounded, come out with hands up. Squidward asks what they want with him and what he did. He gasps and says obviously he violated some new box kicking law. He walks out of his house showing the green box and says, "Look, officers, everything is okay and he won't do it again." A criminal voice inside the box says they'll never take him alive. Another man's voice inside says, "No, Johnny, don't do it." Police sirens are heard. Squidward gets angry and kicks his green box towards SpongeBob and Patrick's box. Patrick opens the box and the sirens stop. He says, "Whoopee, another box." He takes the hat box and closes the box they're sitting in. Police sirens are heard again. Squidward says he has to try to relax, noting perhaps he can drown out their childish games with a little TV. He turns on the TV to see a show with boxes on a conveyor belt in a factory. A narrator explains this is where boxes reach their final stage of assembly. Squidward changes the channel to an old professor talking about a box equation on a chalkboard. The professor says the equation is illustrated here by this box. Squidward changes the channel to a soap opera with a man and woman. The man says he couldn't afford a present this year, so he got her this box. He holds up a box. The woman says that's what she got him and holds up another box. Squidward asks if there isn't anything on that isn't about boxes. He changes the channel to a boxing match. An announcer says welcome back to championship boxing. Squidward chuckles in hope and says he guesses this is okay, noting it's not really about boxes. Two boxes go at each other in the ring. Squidward says he gives up. An astronaut voice inside SpongeBob and Patrick's box counts down and announces blast off. Loud rocket takeoff noises are heard from the box. Squidward asks, fascinated how they're doing that, calling it the most realistic space launch he's ever heard. He says there must be an explanation and tells himself to think. He imagines SpongeBob and Patrick giggling. SpongeBob says shh and grabs a tape recorder to play music with real rocket sound effects. He calls Squidward a jerk. Both laugh in his imagination. Squidward says laugh at him, will they, and opens the box once again, demanding to know where it is. Patrick comes out of Squidward's green hat box announcing, here he is. SpongeBob asks, where's what Squidward? Squidward tells them not to give him that, and asks where the tape recorder is. SpongeBob says they don't have a tape recorder. Squidward tells him not to say that. SpongeBob insists they don't. Patrick holds up a small white rectangular box and says they have a tape recorder box. Squidward takes the small white box from Patrick and throws it off screen. He says, all right, make way, he's coming in. He gets into the box. SpongeBob welcomes him aboard and says he's just set sail on the S. Imagination, making a rainbow with his hands. He asks where Squidward wants to go first. Squidward says no, don't mind him. He's just here to observe. SpongeBob says, but Squidward, don't you see? Waiting and watching is not what the box is about. He says it's about imagination and makes one last rainbow with his hands. Squidward says, all right, fine, and makes the rainbow go away with his hands. He tells them to take him to Robot Pirate Island, saying he wants to arm wrestle with cowboys on the moon. He adds, just do it so he can get back and watch TV. SpongeBob says, okay, Robot Pirate Island it is. He and Patrick close their eyes and make pirate and robot sounds. Patrick imitates robot beeps. SpongeBob imitates a pirate saying, "Arr." Patrick makes more beep sounds. SpongeBob says, "Ahoy, matey." Patrick beeps. SpongeBob says for that, he'll walk the plank. He giggles softly while Patrick starts chuckling. Squidward gets angry and asks, why won't this thing turn on? He slams the bottom of the box with his fists. He says, all right, fine. If they don't want to show him, he doesn't care. He gets out of the box and says he has better things to do than pace the floor wondering how they work this thing. He paces back and forth in his house, asking how those two work that thing. He says there's gotta be a secret button or switch or something telling himself to listen to that. He hears real robot and pirate battle noises from the box and says, now that sounds like Robot Pirate Island. He tells himself to think and says he's got it. When those two go to bed, he'll sneak in there and find that button. He announces he'll wait all night if he has to and sits in his chair until nighttime. Fireworks and cheering sounds are heard coming from the box. SpongeBob and Patrick come out of the box. Patrick yawns and says he needs sleep to refuel his imagination tanks. Squidward looks out of his window. SpongeBob says he still can't believe those pirates beat all those robots. Patrick agrees and says see you in the morning. SpongeBob says good night, Patrick. He and Patrick both go into their houses. Squidward sneaks out of his house, then tiptoes over to the box and gets inside. He chuckles mischievously and sees a piece of paper on the side of the box. He says, hello, what's this? And reads a plaque commemorating the brave pirates who gave their lives to keep this box safe from the robot menace. He says, oh, and tears the paper into pieces with anger. He says he has to find that button quick and looks around the box. He notes it has to be around here somewhere, but he doesn't see anything, just an empty box. He suggests maybe it really was their imagination and tells himself to get it together. He asks what he's saying and questions if he really believes that if he sits here and pretends to drive a race car, that he's suddenly going to start hearing noises. He turns an imaginary steering wheel and pushes his foot down on a pretend gas pedal. The sound of an engine revving is heard. He questions what's happening and pushes the gear shift. He says it actually works and he can't believe it. He says this beats TV by a long shot and laughs. He says this is the most fun he's ever had. The noises actually come from a garbage truck which lifts the box into the other garbage. SpongeBob is reading a book in bed with his bedposts lit like candles. He tells Gary to listen to that, noting Squidward finally made the box work after all, and calling it so great. Squidward laughs in the distance as the garbage truck begins to drive away with the box. He says only 2 more laps until the finish line. The garbage truck dumps out the trash, including the box. He says he's in the lead and tells others to get out of his way, adding he's almost there. He laughs as the box slides down a trash pile and says, victory is mine. The box hits something and opens, sending Squidward tumbling down the trash pile, landing face first onto a cherry pie. He groans, and the box falls on him. After a bubble transition to the next morning, SpongeBob and Patrick come out of their houses. SpongeBob says, hey, their box is gone. Patrick says, oh well. SpongeBob says he knows and suggests they go see Squidward. Patrick says he hopes Squidward is not too down in the dumps today. He and SpongeBob walk to Squidward's house as the episode ends. Idiot Box earned its reputation as one of the greatest SpongeBob episodes because it perfectly captured the show's central theme about the power of imagination, while creating a story where the cynic gets exactly what he asked for in the worst possible way. The episode understood that SpongeBob and Patrick's childlike wonder represented something genuine and valuable rather than something to mock. Squidward's journey from dismissing their imagination to desperately trying to understand it to finally experiencing it himself created perfect character development compressed into 11 minutes. The opening sequence established the contrast between perspectives immediately. SpongeBob and Patrick's elaborate dancing celebration over receiving a box demonstrated their ability to find joy in simple things. Squidward's assumption they ordered bubble soap showed his inability to imagine they might want something unusual. The reveal that they ordered an expensive television just to play in the box subverted expectations while establishing the episode's core concept. Throwing away the TV to keep the box made their values clear. SpongeBob's rainbow hand gesture when saying imagination became iconic because it represented his sincere belief in imagination's power. The repetition of this gesture throughout the episode reinforced the theme while creating visual comedy. Squidward's failed attempt to replicate the rainbow showed his fundamental disconnect from the concept. His cynical interpretation that he could imagine watching TV, therefore he should get the actual TV, demonstrated his misunderstanding of what imagination means. The mountain climbing sequence showcased the episode's genius by creating elaborate sound effects that seemed impossible to produce with just voices. SpongeBob and Patrick's dialogue about climbing too high, acclimating, and being the Lizard King built a scenario that felt real despite happening in a cardboard box. The avalanche triggered by Squidward's kick created consequences that made the imaginary scenario have stakes. Patrick's frozen legs and SpongeBob's cut-off arms raised the drama to absurd levels. Squidward's shock when opening the box to find them just sitting there created the central mystery that drove his obsession. The sound effects escalation demonstrated perfect comedic structure. Each new scenario introduced more elaborate and realistic sounds that made Squidward's confusion grow. The helicopter rescue, the police chase with criminals, the rocket launch, and the robot pirate battle all built upon each other while maintaining the central question of how they created these sounds. The episode never provided a rational explanation, forcing viewers to either accept imagination as the answer or share Squidward's frustration. Squidward's attempts to debunk their imagination showed his need for logical explanations. His theory about a tape recorder represented the cynic's assumption that magic must have a trick behind it. His examination of the box looking for buttons or switches demonstrated his inability to accept something without mechanical explanation. His attempt to use the tiny hat box showed his willingness to try imagination, but only on his terms and with inadequate tools. His failure to make it work reinforced that imagination requires genuine belief rather than cynical participation. The TV sequence where every channel showed boxes provided perfect ironic commentary. Squidward trying to escape the box obsession, only to find boxes everywhere, demonstrated how his fixation on understanding SpongeBob and Patrick's game consumed him. The boxing match, giving him momentary hope before revealing boxes in the ring, showed the universe conspiring to keep him focused on his obsession. This sequence worked because it showed Squidward's defeat before his eventual breakthrough. The nighttime infiltration represented Squidward's complete surrender to obsession. His plan to wait all night demonstrated how thoroughly SpongeBob and Patrick got under his skin. The plaque about brave pirates keeping the box safe from the robot menace showed SpongeBob and Patrick's commitment to their imaginative scenarios, even when alone. Squidward, tearing it up in anger, revealed his frustration had reached breaking point. The ending provided perfect poetic justice through misdirection. Squidward finally experiencing imagination working seemed like his redemption moment. His joy at discovering imagination's power felt genuine and earned. The reveal that the sounds came from a garbage truck, rather than his imagination, delivered the ultimate punchline. The episode gave Squidward exactly what he wanted, the experience of imagination working, but made it hollow by revealing it was mechanical sounds all along. His tumble down the garbage pile, landing face first in pie and being covered by the box created physical comedy that reinforced his humiliation. The final joke about hoping Squidward isn't too down in the dumps worked on multiple levels. Patrick's innocent concern contrasted with the literal truth that Squidward was actually in a dump. SpongeBob's acknowledgement that Squidward made the box work showed he genuinely believed Squidward finally understood imagination. The audience knowing Squidward experienced a garbage truck rather than imagination created dramatic irony that made the ending more satisfying. Idiot Box succeeded by taking a simple concept about imagination and building it into a story about belief, cynicism, and the price of demanding rational explanations for magic. The episode proved that SpongeBob worked best when it respected its core themes while finding new ways to explore them through perfectly structured comedy. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe and I'll see you in the next video.